around us crumbles, but we know it'll be okay. Those of us that know the truth know you are here to stay. We know what things are coming to, and we know that we must pray. But pray to God with authority, for you are the ultimate plan. The rhythm of servitude is over when you take your own hand and walk to the promised land. So come now people, gather all around. Your light that is inside of you is born to make you proud. God is not a man in the sky, it's in your heart. It's in your heart. You are the all, that is the all. You are a portal to another dimension. And did I mention that you are God? Yourself and live in your own authority, so that you can live as the majority of who you really are. You are divine, let your light shine. Raise your hands and let it all go. You have so much to show, let it all go. So come now people, gather and give out. Your light that is inside of you is born to make you proud. God is not a man in the sky, it's in your heart, it's in your eyes. You are the all that is the all. Fly through this world knowing you're part of the fold of those that know and are here to heal. Healing yourself is healing the mother. Listen in, my sister and brothers, be united in our love. We're all here to love you, my sister and my brother. So take your own hand, for you are God, is the all of all. Your body is an illusion, and so is your soul. It's all just a witness and the one true love. God gives the people with the power to see that all they really need is inside them, not buried too deep. Open up your heart, inside is the God spark, waiting for your own sacred activation. Your true divine ascension, let's heal the nations. Together we are all one, it's the all, we are all one. So come now people, gather all around. Your light that is inside of you is born to make you proud. God is not a man in the sky, it's in your heart, it's in your eyes. You are the all. God is not a man in the sky, it's in your heart, it's in your eyes. You are the all.
Hello, and thank you for being here today on Transcending Ascension Podcast Live. Today we're with my OG podcast friend, Stephan from BG Cast. I'm sure you all know him. We're all starting to circle in the same little groups, mostly thanks to him. So I'm very happy to have him back. And honestly, God brought us our topic, or the divine. So it should be good. And here we go. So thank you so much for being here today, Stephan.
Of course. Thanks for having me back on. I appreciate it. It's been a while. I haven't been on Transcending Ascension in a bit, so it's good to be back.
Yeah. I shut it down for a long time because I don't know. I had too many guests that weren't in alignment, and I just wasn't, you know how things are in alignment and they're not. And then it just, our group, the conscious collective panel, that's like came first. And then I'm like, I don't know, it brought back the alignment. And now I'm reaching out to guests that fall into alignment. And Don's helping with that too. Like, I love what he's doing. I love that we're creating this neural network. So I'm back, maybe to stay. We'll see. My energy is, I just go with how it is. And that's how we should all do. And I'm excited to talk about it today, though, because if you're having problems with your energy, this source will certainly help. And that's Christ. So, sure. Stay with us, though, because we're going with a metaphysical Christ here. So, Stephan, I want to start you off with your thoughts and on this subject. And yes.
Well, this is actually a topic that I'm very well versed in. When it comes to Jesus, the Bible, how it's been doctored and altered throughout the years. I mean, we're talking from, going back to the Q Gospel, the pre-Nicene New Testament, the interlinear text, all of these different variations of the Bible that exist that tell us these different things, as well as these different books that did not make it into the canonical texts. There's a lot of books of Acts. There's a lot of the Christian Apocrypha. There's a lot of Old Testament Apocrypha too that never actually made it into the canonical text. But to me, these books that are not in this canonical text, this is like the metaphysical portion of Christianity. And, you brought it to my attention that, you're starting to notice this, like, hey, there's a lot of these top people in the modern Christian community, and they're teaching metaphysics. Like, they're kind of like bringing it up. And to me, that got me excited, because in my eyes and in my opinion right now, I'm not trying to, ruffle any feathers when I say this, but this is an aspect of what modern Christianity is missing at this point in time, is missing its metaphysical background. And like we were talking in our group chat as well, there's a synergy between Christ and metaphysics, and they work hand in hand. So I'm actually happy this is starting to happen, because now this could accelerate our shift. This could really put forth a huge change by having Christians start to take on that metaphysical aspect of their faith that they've been missing out on. So I'm completely stoked about it. I think it's great, and I hope to see more of this. And I hope, us doing this show is going to help kind of catalyze that in our collective consciousness, so we can start to see more of it. Because, I was telling you guys in the group chat about this woman I'm having on. She's got back a hold of me, thankfully, but I'll be having her on the 21st, and she's with the Order of Melchizedek. And she stated to me in one of her channelings, and one of the things she was telling me about, that the Bible Belt's a major source of power, that if the Bible Belt were to awaken, to its fullest extent, in a lot of ways, it would be endgame and acceleration towards, a bigger shift in our collective consciousness. So I'm excited. I really am. And I look forward to diving into this, because, my thoughts. I think Jesus was just like us, man. I really do. I think he was just like us. And what better way to hide that fact than to make him appear as something that's unattainable, something that's too godly, too divine, not for human eyes or hands. You can't get here. So to me, it's one of the biggest kept secrets, that Christ was just like us, and all of us are capable of doing what he was capable of doing as well.
Yes, 1000%. And this can be used to take away his power when we think, not what you meant, but how he gets used. Because when you spoke, it came to me, and I've started writing it down. I actually ordered fancy podcasts, things with my things, so I can write.
There you go.
I have these things, and then by the time it comes to me, it's like poof, gone. And so I was like, no, because these things just come to me, and rather than interrupt, I want to write it down. And the push and the pull of what's going on now with Christ, what's going on with the cross. I have crosses back there, and sometimes I'm like, should I take them down? I'm wearing an agate cross today, and I used to wear it for years.
You froze up, Diana. Are you there? I definitely want to see this agate cross, though. That's pretty cool. There we go. Yeah. You're back. Cool. No worries. Yeah.
The price of daytime shows. But it's the cross, so it's the box that keeps us in. And then it's like, I trust and believe so much is what he says, but I don't think he's saying it. I don't even think most channelers say things wrong on purpose. And maybe there's multiple layers. I don't know what to think or say. But when I look at the sun, that little, if you follow my Twitter, you'll see it. I'm using it all the time now. That cross of the sun, when you're staring at, I sun gaze, everyone knows this, I think, if you watch me, and you get that image in the sun, and then you get that image if you close your eyes. Like, there's something in the cross, like whether or not Jesus was nailed to one to die, I believe he probably was, because I know ritualistic magic, and I know that kind of magic is the kind of thing that could free the world from the blood covenant they were under. However, I equally love that he escaped to South France, started the Cathars, created the Rh negative bloodline, and here we are. And it's like, or the starseed bloodline, like what you were saying, or, both, because the starseed bloodline could be the energetic bloodline, or it went into our parents. There's so many things to unpack here with Jesus. And the true story of Christ and what that energy is, but it's coming to us more and more that it's embedded in the actual matrix we are in, like our actual and the good matrix, the true matrix. It might be the completeness of the true matrix, that Christ energy, because I've said it many times, he's the one who came into my life and throughout my whole life from birth and just kept whispering to me that God is real, that I'm an angel, that God is real, that the soul is real. And I was raised an atheist, so I was this constant battle of what's real. And so I got to the point where it's like I believed he was a real person and then he died, but I never believed he was like, but then I can feel the untruth to trying to say it now that he wasn't. I know he's the son of God now, because we're all the son of God. We're all because what the song that just opened the show, the all of the all, it is the all of the all. And it's like, it gets down into layers, but Christ is such an important energy for us to discuss, for us to embody, for us to speak of, because Christ has risen. We all feel it because we are that Christ. So I want to take it over to you, Stephan, because you had information that you wanted to discuss about the apostles. We know, if you're esoteric, that Jesus taught his apostles higher level information than he taught the general public. So if you're versed on him in the Bibles, even if you're versed on him in the extra Gnostic texts, like the Nag Hammadi library, which I've gone through, and even the Gospel of Q, which turns out is in a separate thing. So I assumed I'd read it, and it turns out no. So I got my hands on the teachings of it, not word for word, but still, it lines up even still with what's in the actual Bible. But there was other information, the deeper truths, probably closer to what you'd find in the Hermetics, that he taught his apostles. So take it away on what they could do.
So one thing I want to touch on before I dive into that, though, you were talking about the cross. So one thing, what's very interesting about the cross is I think the two-dimensional format of it is the one that binds us. And this is just my opinion of this, because for those of you who don't know what a tesseract is, a tesseract is a four-dimensional cube. So if you can think of a cube in 4 dimensions, that's a tesseract. And but what happens when you unfold this tesseract is you get a 3-dimensional crucifix. So we're looking at this. We have this from 3D to 4D. Right. So, we have this 3-dimensional crucifix that kind of wraps into this tesseract, and this tesseract will unwrap in this 3rd-dimensional crucifix. And, it is said that a lot of these old Gothic cathedrals, like we're talking about, I would say, around the Dark Ages or Middle Ages. I mean, anywhere from, they were built, I think, from around 500 AD all the way up until anywhere from 12 to 1300 AD, but they were built in this cruciform structure. And these are these Gothic cathedrals that people go into, and they'll experience this resonance in there, and it's healing to them. Like, it actually heals their body. It makes them feel better. Exactly. A tesseract. Yep. And there we go. We got the 3-dimensional cross right there as well. So yes, so there's something profoundly interesting about this. I just wanted to bring this up because you were talking about sun gazing and seeing the cross and the sun. There's a very interesting correlation with this 4th-dimensional hypercube and the 3D crucifix. So you look at what the tesseract stands for in 4D. It's for like almost the 0 point. It's almost like, a concept of, the perception of time, a lot of these different things that are unwrapped and unraveled into this 3D crucifix, which could very much kind of symbolize our 3D existence a little bit and all the aspects of it as well. So I find it interesting. It's so healing, but nonetheless, yes, let's dive into this. So like we were saying before, I think Jesus was a lot like us. And when you look at a lot of these books that did not make it into the canonical Bible, there's actually quite a few books of Acts that did not. And one of the ones that stood out to me most was the Acts of Andrew. So for those of you who don't know who Andrew is, Jesus had more apostles than 12. Okay. He actually, I think, had, if I'm correct, upwards of over 30 different ones. I think it was 33, but don't quote me on that exactly. I don't know for sure. but he had quite a few apostles that did not make it into the canonical text, Andrew being one of them, Barnabas being another one of them. There's quite a few, and of course we've heard about the book of Barnabas. That was a Gnostic apocryphal text that surfaced, I want to say, back in 2016, around 2015, 2016. And the book of Barnabas was interesting because Barnabas and Paul didn't like each other, right? They had beef, if we're kind of talking about it in today's modern terms. But Barnabas even stated himself that Jesus was just a human being who unlocked this and awoken this divine spark within himself, and he had these remembrances of his true nature. I mean, this is kind of in the preface of the book of Barnabas itself. So this even lends more credence to the fact that Jesus was just like you and I. He was not some divinity God being who was special and who was chosen or things like that. He was just like us. So real quick, I'm going to bring to the screen, if you don't mind, I'm going to share it real quick. I have the Acts of Andrew up here. So Andrew had all of the same abilities.
Yeah, because Andrew's in the Bible. So do you just mean they didn't talk about his powers?
They did not talk about his powers. So there's a book, I'm about to bring it up. It is the Acts of Andrew. It's in the apocryphal New Testament. And this is where he talks about healing himself, or healing different people like Christ did. So here, let's bring it up real quick. I'm going to present it. And this is a very interesting book, here we go. All right. So we have this here. Now I'm going to go ahead and read some of it, but we have, after the ascension, the apostles dispersed to preach in various countries. Andrew began in the province of Achaia. Matthew went to the city of Myrmidona. Andrew left Myrmidona and came back to his own allotted district. Walking with his disciples, he met a blind man who said, "Andrew, apostle of Christ, I know you can restore my sight, but I do not wish for that. Only bid those with you who give me enough money to clothe and feed myself decently." Andrew said, "This is the devil's voice, who will not allow the man to recover his sight." He touched his eyes and healed him. So this is just one thing, everybody. Just look at this real quick. We have a book from the apocryphal New Testament talking about this apostle Andrew, who had the ability to heal the blind. Okay, so this, of course, this didn't make it into the canonical text. We can see why. Because if everybody, if we started seeing that, Jesus's apostles, a lot of his apostles were capable of doing the same things that he was capable of doing, what this does is it destroys the Son of God narrative they're trying to put. There can only be one Son of God in their eyes, and you must worship him. You know what I mean? So how are you going to worship somebody, as in an effigy format, if his disciples are capable of doing these same quote unquote godly acts that he's capable of doing too? So this is just another big thing that, is overlooked in today's, modern Christianity. And that's because in honesty, where I feel a lot of modern Christians have gone wrong is they've started to look at the church as a source of authority. And in my eyes, the only authorities you should have as a Christian is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Those are the only authorities that you look at as an authority. You don't look at the church or how the church is telling you to interpret the Bible. This is one of the biggest reasons why Jesus's real life and who he really was, I think, was covered up, because even he said that you do not need a medium to communicate with the divine. And, and even just looking at this book, the Acts of Andrew, you can see that he taught a lot of high level stuff to his disciples. This wasn't his disciples just sitting there and listening to what he said and writing it down. Like, Jesus actually taught them how to do a lot of the same things that he did. And even in so many different, I believe it, I don't remember the exact verse itself, but he says, "You are capable of what I am." And he said that verbatim tons of times. So this is something I feel we need to be looking at when we're kind of getting to, digesting what the truth of Christ and the truth of Christianity is, it's way deeper than the surface level. It's way deeper than what's being portrayed to us as modern Christianity at this time. And I hate to say this, but it's like modern Christianity has become a far cry from what it once was. And, I was even talking in the group chat about this, that if Christianity did stay in its unadulterated state, stayed in its pure state throughout the ages, you might be calling some of us Christians today. Like real talk, you might be doing that, because it was a whole different book. It was a whole different way of being. It was about embodying the teachings of Christ. It was about being like Christ. It was not about worshiping Christ, and I even brought up that quote today. Like, there's a huge difference between, and this is with any spiritual teaching. This doesn't even have to do with the Bible. This could do with Taoist principles. This could do with Buddhist and Vedic principles as well. It's one thing to worship. It's one thing to embody. These are two different playing fields. When we talk about worshiping and embodying these teachings, and for me, at least from my perspective, when I look at how people worship these teachings, or they worship these individuals, they don't come to yet fully understand them. They don't, and it's about that deep understanding that's going to change the game for us in our spiritual evolution, our personal growth, and our healing. But when we start to embody the teachings, when we actually start to be like Christ, we start to act as Christ did, looked at how he treated other human beings, how he tried to heal anybody that he came into contact with. And we also must understand, Christ was rebellious. He was not some goody two shoes rule following person, like a lot of modern Christianity wants you to believe is Christ was flipping tables at synagogues, man. Like he was flashing the bankers and whipping. I mean, he hung out with who we would call the degenerates of society. Like, he saw in these people that God was within them. So this is the other thing too, that we got to bring into the picture of this as well, is we have to understand, being like Christ is also standing up and speaking out. Like being like Christ is, bringing atrocities to attention, just like, a lot of us do. So, I think this is a big step for us to kind of, unlock what true Christ is. And how embodying the teachings of Christ is the actual way we want to go with this, as opposed to just worshiping him.
Yes, 1000%, spot on. And there's so much to unpack there, because that's exactly it. And that's the whole reason the church got involved and just stifled the narrative, because we are in a free will universe. They had to keep the truth there. But then they're allowed to do as many lies as they want, as long as the full truth is there, because that's a free will universe. You chose to believe the lie. The truth is in the Bible. When does it ever mention Christ as his last name? It's not. Christ, Krishna, they're the same being, probably a blue being, because he was blue. Those blue beings are real, said to be Palladian, and I've actually seen one and talked to one, and it was like very recently. So this stuff is coming online, and they are the ones of that higher energy. So Krishna, Christ, same thing. They put that in there. So they were telling us. And then every single thing Jesus said, even though it wasn't his higher level stuff, it was spot on. And the work he did with the poor and the sick and everything, he was never holier than thou. If you watch Christians working with the people because they say they're doing the work of Christ, they're holier than thou. Oh, these poor peasants. And everything they do is of service, and you're so lucky to have us. Everything they did was a control narrative. The Catholics were honestly the most insidious and the darker of the two. But then the Protestants, they actually tried to have a revival. Martin Luther, I studied him deeply, and it's why when I chose to go Christian, I went Protestant, because Martin Luther was a fantastic man, and I think he was trying to pull back the teachings of Christ. But again, humans do what they do, and they named the church after him and put you in a tighter box, because Protestantism ended up becoming stricter, and that's actually what led to atheism, was the Protestants, because they completely removed the feminine. That's not a good idea. Because your point there of the Holy Trinity, It's masculine, feminine, heros, gamos. Like that's the two: masculine, feminine, heros, gamos. Like, and and that's what Christ is telling us. Christ is that androgynous being. So whether or not he was with Mary Magdalene matters not to me, because to me, the divine feminine, people get too caught up in Mary, and I don't feel it. To each their own. Mary can be fantastic, but the divine feminine is the earth. So again, you might be kind of being misled away from your roots, because the feminine is the earth. The sun is the masculine, and Christ is the heros gamos, the middle pillar. Christ is that center point. So the focus, Father is the sun, and the sun is probably a portal from the world that we're probably more sending through our holographic information as the way dimensions spit out dimensions, right? And that's just the way it is. So Christ is so much more than a person. Jesus was fantastic. And the fact that a flesh human was able to completely embody him, like you saying, he's the exact same as us, means that we can be that exact same when we live in true sovereign discernment, because the soul is that Christ space. I don't see, or it's a layer, because everything's so layered. It is such a huge aspect that when we embody it, we expand out our being of what we truly are, because there's codes in it, which we're learning the quantum language now too. There is codes in the Christ language. There is the awakening, the embodiment, what the human that they say we were, but what we were always meant to be, a flesh angel. Like the whole point of this was to be a flesh angel, but through lies, manipulation, and cutting us off, they made us what we were. But they pushed us too far, and now beings are here helping us. Christ among those 2,000 years ago. That all happened to save us. So calling him a savior, you're not exactly wrong. He is. But that savior still lives within you. You should never worship him, though, because he would never ask you to worship him. He said the kingdom of heaven was within. He said, worship no man. He said all these things over and over and over again. Yet we listen to what Paul said. Paul's not Jesus. Paul wasn't even one of the apostles, and Paul was hunting down and killing Christians. And we're supposed to just believe he had an awakening from Jesus. And even if he did, we've seen starseeds come online and still say falsehoods because they let their ego get to them. Out of nowhere, he's the one that's in the Bible more than the actual apostles. That's not suspicious. And he just so happened to say the narratives like women shouldn't talk in church. This used to bug me when I go to church. Women shouldn't talk in church because they will disgrace themselves. That right there was like, I can never fit into this religion. I can, because I tried, and everyone who's heard my story knows I spent a couple years trying to fit into that peg because the class was so serious. But just recently, I heard a YouTuber or someone saying, Christ never asked you to go to church, did he? Look inside yourself. Did Christ ever ask you to go to church? No. He asked you to go within, and we took it because we're social creatures. We want that. And some of you guys were raised in that. I wasn't. So me trying to do that, I'm glad I did it because it taught me a lot. It was like an experiment and an experience. And now I know what I know. I became a minister myself because of it. And that's what it is. And now here we are bringing back Christ, bringing it back online, and then just unpacking that Christ energy. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that because it's just growing.
Well, like you said, what you were just saying, as far as Christ being a savior, it's what we have to look at the context of savior as. There's a lot of people who think Christ is a revealer. Like, I think he's a combination of a revealer and a savior. So one of the biggest things, when we look at the different texts of the Bible, so we have the creation story out of the secret book of John. Right. And this is where you could see him as a savior in this sense, too, although the Christians who pay attention to the canonical text think he's the devil in this, unfortunately. But, in the secret book of John, Adam and Eve were actually created as a heavenly Adam and Eve first. They existed in the pleroma. And once Yaldabaoth created the earth and the physical realm with his archons, he ended up ripping the heavenly Adam and the heavenly Eve out of the pleroma onto the earth, where him and his archons made the human body out of clay. And what ended up happening, though, is the ions caught wind of this, what was going on. So the ions decided to come down, strike a deal with Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, and they were breathing the breath, the divine spark, into these physical humans that were created. So originally, when we talk about the Garden of Eden in the canonical texts of the Bible, it seems like this wonderful place, this amazing place where, we live in this harmony with our divine creator. But unfortunately, it's not a real divine creator. It was a false unity consciousness at that time. And so one of the biggest things that got smashed with the Council of Nicaea. Now, one of the biggest things I want to correct people on, the Council of Nicaea did not dictate biblical canon. There was about 5 Italian councils and 4 British councils that occurred after that actually dictated the biblical canon. But what the Council of Nicaea did is it smashed any early Christian beliefs. It smashed any alternative earlier Christian beliefs, such as something called Arianism. Now, what Arianism is, it is the belief that Christ has always existed. The energy of Christ existed since the creation itself. It wasn't something that was created from the divine or Yaldabaoth or however we're looking at it. Christ has existed since the beginning of creation. And this kind of takes that into account, because as Adam and Eve were in this false unity consciousness under Yaldabaoth in the quote unquote Garden of Eden, Christ was the one that showed up and had them eat from the tree of God, of knowledge of good and evil and things like that, because this fall is ultimately what saved us from this false unity consciousness. And then we look at, so this is actually something I'm even borrowing from Sarah the Alchemist here. Props to Sarah, don't get me wrong, but she did a whole episode on this, and I can't tell you, it's worth the watch, because when we're talking about falls, like this in this sense wasn't necessarily a bad fall, because it got us out of this false unity consciousness and helped us back on this upward path of reuniting with our divine nature and the divine spark. If you are inclined to read that, I would. It's the Secret Book of John. You can find the PDF online. It's widely available. But this is what I mean, Christ being a savior. Christ is a revealer, a awakener, and a savior. So he comes here to liberate us, or the energy of Christ comes here to liberate us, from the false binds of this demiurge, this physical reality, understanding it brings us back to our true nature, exactly like you're saying. If it was set up in the sense it was meant to set up, yes, we would have a bunch of flesh angels walking around right now. And we'd be in a lot better place in this world if that was the case, as opposed to what's happening right now. The other thing I want to touch on you with too is you're talking about Christ as the middle pillar. I absolutely agree. So there's something interesting about our third density reality is we have an as above, so below with the symbolic and the literal. So, when we have this symbolism of the middle pillar, you were talking about how the earth is the feminine, the sun is the masculine. A lot of people, a lot of different other mythologies think the stars or the universe is the masculine, because there's a lot of Native Americans who think, the star is where men came from the stars, women are of earth, but men came from the stars. So that's their symbolism behind it on that.
Light and dark, because the earth is dark. Yeah. So yeah.
Exactly. So, but there's one thing about this third density reality, and this is why we can bring it into play that while yes, Christ is an energy, there's also an embodiment of that too, is because we have the as above, so below correlation with symbolic and literal. For every symbolic instance here, we have a literal counterpart and vice versa. So yes, that's the cool thing about this reality and this experience that we're having is, and you guys have heard me say, who listen to my show, that symbolism is the prime language of this reality. It is the main language, at least in my eyes at this time, because through symbolism and symbols, you can convey a broader spectrum of meaning, a broader spectrum of communication through this as you can through just spoken words. So, and yes, Christ is the middle pillar. He is the unification between the left and right hemispheres of the brain. He is that bridge. And, we do have that bridge between our right and left hemispheres of the brain. And, if we strengthen that bridge, through our healing and our meditation and things like that, that is ultimately what is going to lead ourselves into that balanced energy of both the divine masculine and divine feminine. I mean, we also see the symbolism for the 12 cranial nerves, the 12 disciples, the 144,000, the 144,000 nadis. So, there's a huge crossover between the symbolic and the literal here. So yes, I do know for sure that Christ is an energy, but we can have the embodiment of him here as well, or of it here as well. And that's one thing I even want to kind of guide our conversation towards. We talk about the return of Christ, like the true return of Christ. And at least at this point in time, what it feels like to me is it's going to be a surge of energy within us all. There might be one individual who might at first have the full realization, but then shortly afterwards, there are going to be multiple individuals that are going to have this realization too. So that's kind of what I foresee happening when it comes to the return of Christ. Christ is going to return through us, essentially. And there are going to be people who understand this and realize this, and they're going to go forth and help people out as well, because I've gotten these messages in my own experience, and a lot of the experiences I've had through different meditations, through, Kriya, entheogens, things like that, these higher beings are done sending back just one single person, because every time they send back one single person, the worship thing starts to happen again. I mean, you look at all of these different variations of Christ. I mean, we look at Osiris, we look at Mithra. I mean, we look at Ahura Mazda, from Zoroastrianism. We look at a lot of these different aspects of Christ that have lended itself to, we see that this energy could have potentially had many embodiments throughout, the time or the course of human history too. And that's what that leads me to believe, is that it wasn't one solo embodiment with many different interpretations. It's very possible that these were different embodiments of this very similar Christ energy. So that's what I think is essentially going to happen, is because every time they would send one of them back, they would end up getting worshipped. The point would be missed. There'd be effigies and statues built of this person. Nobody embodied the teachings, and life went on. So that's why I think now we're going to have the resurgence in mass. It's going to be more than just one person, because at that point, you can't fall back to the human nature of worshiping something you don't understand. You can't fall back to it at that point, because now we're having all of these humans embodying this energy and, showcasing this. And, that's going to be real hard. I mean, who are you going to worship at that point? Are you going to worship humanity itself at that point? Which, I mean, is not a bad thing to do. We only have each other. But as far as worshiping, that's not the road I would take, when it comes to that. But I think that's going to stifle the mistakes that have happened in the past, because it's going to be a mass resurgence of this energy. It's going to be in multiple people. It's going to stifle the worship complex. It's going to just slap it out of here once and for all, which needs to be done. It has to stop. And then it's going to go focus more towards embodiment. And at least in my eyes, that's the real way. Your mic.
Sorry. Yes, I completely agree. I would make an argument, but it's more now. It's all individuated. Jesus was such a concentrated dose to end that blood covenant, because that was real, and that was over the whole earth. It was witchcraft. It was nuts. And they lived like that willingly, because it was a time of survival. So they took their blood god because it would protect them if they did so many things. And it's a time of survival we can't even comprehend. So it's not even any judgment. But Jesus came and he ended it. And not coincidentally, when he ended it, life just got better. The rapid improvement over the last 2,000 years is because of Jesus, because of ending that blood covenant, because it let the light inside of us come alive. And people still, even 100 years ago, seem barbaric to us. Yet
Mhm.
compared to what Jesus was born into, they were sparkly star beings themselves. So like
Mhm.
it's been steadily always improving forever and ever. Like there's this one YouTube video where it goes back throughout time through newspaper articles all the way until like before Christ, talking about how the next generation, how they're worse, when actually they were getting better and better and better. But the
Mhm.
old people just couldn't handle it, showing the progression of humanity. It just doesn't end. And Jesus himself went and grabbed his apostles just like that. If you ever watch the show, The Chosen, it shows it. Like he just knew where they were and went and got them, meaning they were
Mhm.
star seeds themselves. And he even told his apostles after he's gone that they would recognize the next one. And Stephen was the next one to replace Judas. And the other guys just recognized him. And how do you think they're recognizing them?
I just
Yeah.
want to say real quick, if you don't mind, that's why I do have a natural beef with Paul, because he did stone, or he had Saint Stephen stoned to death. So that's kind of where my natural beef with Paul arises from, because that's who I'm named after. So it's kind of carrying that down the line. But continue. I'm sorry. I just
No,
wanted to
that's
say
awesome.
that.
I have beef with Paul too, and that just came from actually just reading the Bible. Like I was already versed in paganism and witchcraft before I came to the Bible. So I read almost the whole first part is witchcraft. But then I got to Paul and I'm like, you're a douche. Like straight up, he's a douche. And it was obvious reading it. I'm like, you. And then in church, sure enough, and I hear reports, everyone says the same. They mostly teach Paul because he said the rules and they made the majority of it about him. Meanwhile, he
Mhm.
talks about how the other apostles were arguing with him. So again, they're telling you the truth. Why would you believe Paul over the actual apostles that worked directly with Jesus? Does that make any sense whatsoever? No. Jesus' own brother James was one of the biggest people in a fight with Paul. Are you joking? And they allowed Paul to discredit James like some kind of outsider. He was apparently Jesus' actual flesh brother as well as one of the
Mhm.
apostles. Like, oh my God, it's so obvious. If you know, honestly, it's so obvious if you simply just read the Bible yourself. Because the
It
problem
is.
is a lot of these Christians are not actually reading the Bible themselves. They're just going to church and they're reading the odd passage and doing the odd Bible study. But they're picking and choosing, because I went to Bible school as well. Like I really went deep into this. And
Mhm.
I would come back. I had a personal teacher. It was really cool. I should send that because it's like the bibleschool.org or something. And you get a personal teacher one-on-one and you go through the lessons and you're able to write this guy, this poor Texas guy, dude. Before I finished, I was in my last class and I had to do my exam with a different girl because the Texas guy had to go off on medical leave. And I'm like, oh my God, I heard him because I kept talking about I was like, does this mean something about vibrations, dimensions, frequency? Like I kept coming because I wanted to really.
Uh-huh. Diana, you froze up a little again. But no, I'm with you. I understand what you're saying. There we go. There we go. There we go. You're back. You're back. No, continue. Sorry.
I don't know where it cut off, but I kept coming at this guy with my questions very nicely. I'm very
Mhm.
sweet. And
Yeah.
and he was very sweet back. So he was a very nice Christian man. And we would go back and forth and I would say my thing and he would not even acknowledge the vibration part and just be the word of Christ. And he would have scriptures that would kind of try to like talk, Church of Christ taught Paul. And as a child, I called it out. I got in
What's up,
trouble a lot
Hiker
in church.
Trash? What's
Good
up?
job. Yeah, being able to call out the Paul drama is like the sign that you're a star seed. If you see Paul
Yeah.
for what he is, you're a star seed because it's just it's so obvious. I'm just going to repeat myself. So I want to talk about the original church that you mentioned because that's very true and people don't realize this because that Nicene thing was like $500 years later, right?
Yeah, it
So
was
there
about
was
like, yeah.
I think it's around there. And so the actual Christians were picking up such mass, such speed that emperor at the time, his own mother had become Christian. So he was like, okay, I guess this is getting real. And he vibed with it. He never gave up his pagan ways, but he did actually like the
Mhm.
teachings of Christ. So he might not have, but he's a Roman and they were self-serving. And so
Oh,
I don't think he did it to be evil necessarily. And some of the worst things like Hitler are done by people that don't think they're being evil. They think they're doing the right thing. They're just misinformed. So
mhm.
he basically crushed that original church that was teaching the teachings of Jesus. Well, that full immersion baptism I had is the resurrection of this church. Apparently, it kept going in small numbers throughout all the years. And this church claims to be that church. They claim to be the church that is teaching the original teachings of Jesus. So they're not Protestant, they're not Catholic. They're the original Christians before they became Catholic and then started branching off. So that's where I got my full immersion baptism, because I was like, if you're going to do it, and that's that Bible school I went to. So the same people I got baptized with was that Bible school. And they arranged it all for me. And they don't have pastors. They don't have fathers. When you go, it's just a dude. He was a teacher, and they just pick someone to do it. Anybody could do it. You're not a leader. You're just the one choosing to do the talking. Everybody sings together. It's not a grand show. They don't ask for money, but it's very humble. So if you were to do it, that's the way. If you could find that church, I should find the link.
That's really cool, though. That's good to know. That's good to know, because that's like I was saying earlier in the show. If true Christianity remained untouched and it kept its original format, like I said, you might be calling us, a lot of us Christians today. I will firsthand admit that, that if Christianity stayed intact, because I had it a little bit different than you. Because I know you come from the atheist side of things. When I was growing up, my mom's side of the family was Roman Catholic, and my dad's side of the family was Greek Orthodox. And, when you've heard, for those who have listened to my show and they've heard me say I grew up in the middle of the schism, I kind of really did. I would go, my mom had us, and even though when I was on the weekends with my grandmother, on the Greek side of my family, we would go to Orthodox church on Sundays. But my mom had us in, catechism class, or catechism class. I think that's what it is. And, had us doing all of the stuff at the Catholic church, like, doing our communion, doing our dedication, things like that. So, and even at that point in time for me, being such the young age that I was going through all this, around like 7, 8 years old, I'm like, this doesn't seem right to me. Like I had this internal knowing. I'm like, this doesn't seem right. And then there was the story. I think I haven't brought it up on your show before, but I know I've brought it up in our collective chats, where I was 10 and I was in the Orthodox church, and the priest was literally trying to haggle off church goods for money. He was trying to, it was almost became like an open auction during mass. And I'm like sitting there, even at the age of like 10 years old, I'm like looking at this and I'm like, this is not right. There's something seriously wrong with the church with a priest trying to sell items from the church for personal gain. Like, there's definitely blurred boundaries when it comes to that. And, for a while, what that did is that pushed me, I wouldn't even say agnostic. I would say deist, if anything. Like, I believed in a divine being, and I did believe in intelligent design. I do believe there was a creator to all of this, but I did not have, an exact, trajectory of belief when it came to it, because in my eyes at that point, all of the organized religions were wrong. There's something there. Don't get me wrong. There's definitely a divine aspect to this realm, but the organized religions have made it too black and white. This world's gray. There's very, very rarely. I mean, yes, we have the duality aspect of the third density, but, and I've brought this up on our shows before. When we look to the answers for these questions or these esoteric concepts that we're trying to break down, what do we always find? Very rarely, if at all, do they sway in either end of the polarity. They always happen to be right in the middle, in the gray area. So that's something I've held with me for quite a long time. And, then I did find, I found Gnosticism. I found, the pre-Nicene text. I found a lot of the anti-Nicene fathers, who were actually some of the closest people to the living Jesus, and their scripts that they wrote and their, sermons and things like that. And you find just this very different picture of how everything is. And I wanted to bring this story up actually, because this shows where modern Christianity has gone and why it needs to change. Because if we were still in true Christ, this story would have never happened at all. So I used to work with the guy, right? And he's an electrician. I'm an electrician. That's what I do for a living. And, he's a devout Christian. And he would go to mass in the evenings, but this particular evening he had to work a little bit late. So he still wanted to make it to mass. So he didn't go home, he didn't shower, he didn't change, do anything like that. And he went to church. So, we, a lot of times when we work, we wear blue jeans, t-shirts, work boots, we get dirty.
They gave him in trouble, right?
So what ended up happening was he walked into church and everybody was giving him dirty looks. Mm-hmm. And so he ended up like sitting down and he was, sitting through mass. And at the end of mass, like he went up to the priest and went and talked to him. And he's like, Father, I'm wondering why everybody's giving me such dirty looks tonight. And the priest literally looked at him and said, don't you think you could have wore something nicer to church, son? And this is, and the one of the things I've done too, is I've asked this question to a lot of modern Christians also. And I've said, okay, so let's say I was working, I'm an electrician and I wanted to make it to mass and I didn't have time to go home and shower and clean up. Are you going to still accept me as I am?
There's stuff in the Bible saying, come to me in rags. Come to me in rags.
Exactly. 100%. Come to me in rags if you must. And this is what I mean. So this is just the direction, we've kind of seen it go. It's become very far removed from, it's very deep within an internal and emotional background to this superficial layer of things. So I'd very well be interested. I want to see about that full immersion baptism. I honestly do. I'm very interested to see that because this is what we need to be focusing on. And the other thing too, that at least in my eyes, a lot of Christians need to start doing is actually sitting down, reading the Bible. Okay. Not just being a bandwagon Christian, not being a Christian just because all your family's Christian or your friends are Christian. If you truly,
we're not ruling the Bible out just because you're metaphysical now. Like maybe you were raised Christian, but you never read it, and now you're metaphysical. The Bible still has so much information in there; it's ridiculous. Like the codes, they've broken down the numbers. It's originally like ancient Hebrew, and the letters are numbers, and there is like full metaphysical information. Like the coding, talk about coding that went into that, top notch for a lot of it.
Oh no, you're absolutely right. And that's the thing too. And, and we have this demonization of, coming. So first off, let's talk about the word ritual. Okay. In fact, I'm going to bring up and I'm going to read the definition of the word ritual aloud, because this is one thing we see from the demonization of a lot of modern Christians is the word ritual. They think that ritual. So the definition of ritual, a religious or solemn ceremony consisting of a series of actions performed according to a prescribed order. And in the example, they have the role of ritual in religion. So here's the thing, guys. Oh, hi, Pop. How's it going? And that's the thing, guys. So today's modern Christians want to demonize ritual, but guess what? Every time you go to church on Sunday, guess what that is? That's a ritual. Every time you receive communion, guess what that is? That's a ritual. Ash Wednesday, ritual. Palm Sunday, ritual. So we have this demonization of the word ritual by modern Christians, but they are doing rituals all of the time, yet demonizing them. So that's one of the biggest oxymorons too. Also astrology, the zodiac, and we were shown that in the skies we would have signs in the Bible. This is something God in the Bible said verbatim, that there will be signs.
That's happening too, like big time. The astrology is off the charts. All the alignments that keep happening, and just everything that there was the planetary parade that just happened. Yeah. What was it? January times weird. Hello, that's what happened in the Hercules movie. Like that's how the Titans got released. So 100% on that.
Well, it is. It's like we see Christianity like demonizing its metaphysical and hermetic roots. But when you look at the like even which is ritual, like I just said. We're all doing rituals, either way about, there's no way about it. Honestly. I mean, like I said, going to church Sunday, a ritual. I'm sitting down to meditate, a ritual. The other thing I wanted to bring up too, because you brought up the paganism ties. There are Christian sects that are pagan. Now, I was supposed to have a guy on the show. His name's Tony Chapo, but we were supposed to still do a show on these pagan Christian sects. I'm going to be 100%. I don't know too much about them, just that they exist, and there is this kind of this pagan background to Christianity.
I did, yeah. It's in the witchcraft community, and well, pagan, which it's witchcraft,
yeah.
And then there's also metaphysical Christian. Like I've dived into them both. I haven't read. When I first found Sarah, it's because I was at like Peter. I was still going to church, and I was petering and getting back into metaphysics. But I was trying to find it in a Christ way, which I already knew from the pagan because that was first. Pagan brought me to church, like pagan Christ, church, and then as I petered out, metaphysical Christ, and I already knew metaphysics, obviously. But Sarah, that's how I found Sarah. And you know how we were talking earlier about Mary? I find more resonance with the name Sarah. And there's apparently a secret girl that was part of the crew named Sarah. And she's the one I think a lot of people think Mary is.
I'm getting goosebumps with this one. I did not know that.
That's why the Mary thing, like, I don't know who Mary's his mother and Mary's that other girl. She's great too. I'm not besmirching her. But that sacred energy they're always trying to tie in, that's been said to have been a Sarah. And they removed her completely because she is actually who his wife might be. I mean, you can argue with me on that, but Sarah. And then my best friend growing up who kept me safe my whole life, Sarah. Like, so I was surrounded with Sarah, and now we have a Sarah in our group, and Sarah is just, and I think the seraphim, I think they go hand in hand, and that name Sarah is touched with an extra level of something.
That's because that resonates. That's all I'm going to say, just because of that name. And the name Sarah actually has been showcased to me in a very spiritual light throughout my life also. And that's kind of why it resonates to me, because a lot of the people I've known have as Sarah in my life, they've been kind of almost like a source of comfort, a place of like, guidance. But the one thing I'm going to bring up, and this is something I know we've talked about in our group chat, but even if I do think Jesus did have children, I do. And, and we were talking about how, as above, so below, right? When it comes to this blood. So let's say, let's go hypothetical here. Let's say Jesus and Sarah had 4 kids. Right. And let's couple that with 2,000 years. So if we do like just some basic, like kind of ballpark math going throughout that, let's say those 4 kids had potentially 4 kids apiece and things like that. And as we go down the line, it's very possible, very, very possible at this point in time, we would have around 144,000.
If not more. Genghis Khan, Genghis Khan, right? Almost all of us have traces. If you find Asian in your DNA testing, not that I recommend doing DNA testing, but my husband's aunt did. So not that he did it, but his blood's been that side of the family. And there was Asian. And then there's that old thing. A ton of people are related to Genghis Khan because of how much R-ing he went around doing. And so not that Jesus was doing that, I'm not implying that, but just the way bloodlines, he has millions though, Genghis Khan. So that's an easy thing to think that Jesus would have 144, especially with, they usually had around 12 kids apiece at least. So
yeah, even more.
Spread.
I'm with you. So, and well, you have to take one of the biggest things that I think we overlook, and we don't do it on purpose. We get caught up in other areas. We get our focuses caught in area, as above, so below rings true in every aspect of our reality. It's one of the things that I learned at the very beginning of my spiritual evolution many moons ago at this point. And it is the one thing I have seen showcase itself time and time again in my experience, as above, so below. So, we talk about how the parasite class has their bloodline. They're all distantly related. Like, what was it? Obama and Jimmy Carter were like 30th cousins or something down the line. And so what if that could potentially be a case with us? When we apply the as above, so below principle to that, it's very possible there could be a bloodline amongst us. I mean, we talk about star seeds, we talk about angel seeds. Maybe this is how these higher, these higher density beings can incarnate here. Because they're from higher frequencies, they might need this bloodline because, we look at how the reptilians supposedly they have to go with that bloodline that they have, because they're unable to incarnate here unless they have that shared bloodline that they could access. They're unable to take these human avatars and rule over us like they do unless there's this specific blood that's involved. So with the as above, so below concept, what if that's the case with us? What if that's the case with star seeds and angel seeds? What if we have to have this specific genotype or the specific ancestry about us? And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of us in the awakened community could somehow be distantly related to a degree. I'd be willing to do that experiment. That experiment I would like to do, because that would be interesting to see. Like, we turn out to be like 20th cousins 3 times removed. And, you and Sam turn out to be like 15th cousins, like once removed, and all of that. Like, wouldn't it be weird? But it's a possibility. That's something we need to explore, because that's where I think, they hid that truth about Christ, or they hid that the truth about Jesus, who is an embodiment of these, or Yeshua, who is the embodiment of this Christ energy. And, that his bloodline is out and about, and they wouldn't want us to know that, because that's, number one, an empowering thing for us. 2, that's end game for them and what they're doing at that point. Because if we come into the realization of this, that this is what we have, and this is indeed the truth, it's end game. It's end game. We are going to understand. Yeah.
Completely agree. And what just came to me? And this makes him even more magical, is that he was killed on the cross, and the resurrection wasn't for 40 days. It was permanent. Like, he actually brought that, like he brought Lazarus back. And that's a metaphysical, hermetic, ancient magic thing. They other people have brought people back from the dead. So, and brought themselves back from the dead, even NDRs, like people come back from the dead. So there is a huge argument to be made that he did die on the cross, but then resurrected permanently. And that's what they didn't want to know. Yeah, like maybe he went away from the scene after 40 days, but that was when he went to the south of France and the Cathar story bloodline. And then both stories can be true that way. And that is top level magic, which he is.
So one thing I want to add to that. So what Jesus did, or what this embodiment of Christ did, in my opinion, is it's called ascension to heaven in broad daylight. And what this is, it's actually a Taoist term.
When you sparkle dust in a way, I've heard of that.
So what ascension to heaven in broad daylight is, it's where you ascend in frequency, and you keep your physical body, or you keep your physical form, but you are not dead and you are not alive. You basically, it's ultimately the rainbow body. It's ultimately ascension. It's like, ascension into the next frequency. That's what ascending to heaven in broad daylight is. And we look at when Jesus returned, he could walk through walls. He maintained the same physical appearance that he had while he was in his physical incarnation, but he had become metaphysical. He had become energetic. His body went through a change state. And that's kind of the best way I can describe it. And that's what is called ascension to heaven in broad daylight. Now, if you look at it from the Taoist perspective too, when these humans would achieve this, they would ride into the heavens on the backs of dragons. And, it's interesting when we look at a lot of the dragon symbolism and what it means, kind of throwing that into the picture as well. But that's what I think happened to Christ. I think he ascended to heaven in broad daylight, or at least this embodiment of Christ. Now, who's to know? We can speculate from there. Who's to know that because Christ is an energy and he was just the embodiment, does that avatar of him ultimately return to this Christ energy, this Christ consciousness, and this avatar can be utilized if Christ consciousness wants to showcase itself in any way, shape, or form, or does it just simply take on new avatars as it comes into being again, in its cyclical nature? Because right now we're seeing that rise. I mean, we see this awakening we're going through, Diana. We see a lot of these people who are now just starting to wake up. But for people like us who have been on it for a while, we've been pulling back the layers. We've been doing the work. And this is the surgence of Christ energy itself. This is what's revealing this to us. This is, what is sparking that remembrance, what's sparking that revolution that's kind of happening all of ours. You know, we're saying, what's that meme that floats around a lot? The reason why I woke up is because this reality offended my soul. That's Christ energy right there. If this reality has offended your soul in any way, shape, or form, that is Christ. And it's offended a lot of our souls at this point. Like, you know, there's been some grave debauchery and tomfoolery that's been going on here for a while.
Yeah, and you know what? I want to piggyback on that, because there's been something that comes up all the time, and I think people like it. It's a bit of an ego thing, but I want people to know this, because it goes in with Christ. If you've been offended from this reality, like he's saying, from an early age, like Hiker was saying earlier about getting in trouble when she was young because you just knew things were off, right? But now you're trying to tell you're saying some kind of story that you're a walk-in because you're drastically different than you were before. No, you are not a walk-in. I'm sorry. What you are is you're expanding, probably expanding into that Christ energy, and you're going to pick up.
You froze up, Diana. But I just wanted to say, I'm with you on the walk-in thing for sure. That's a term I've grown to dislike. There you go. There you go. Yeah. There you go.
There'd be voices that came into my head from a very early age, that Christ voice that would tell me to do the better thing, to choose the better route, that would feel almost angelic. And I mean this with no ego whatsoever, but I am that person now. And now higher voices that weren't, I wouldn't even say they were, if they were there, they were quieter, because I resonate with the energy like it was also there, because you keep going up, 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 and it's always been there, the all of the all. But what you're doing is you're expanding into that, and it can seem drastically different. The ego part of you might try to tell you you're a walk-in, because it realizes its own evisceration is coming. And I'm not saying the walk-in might never exist, because I believe in the science of it. However, most of the time, because I'm hearing that term too much, it's a very, very, very rare, and that person probably would have had to naturally die. Otherwise, they're breaking universal law. You can't just go, I'm out. No, they would have had to die literally, and then something else could come in, and this could work evilly as well, like evil thing. But I don't want to cancel, nullify. But what most of you that are saying you're a walk-in, you're not. It's you're expanding. And that good voice that seemed like an angel once upon a time, and this is why we are Christ, that was you. You were Christ. You were that bigger energy coming into yourself, telling you to do the better thing. But as you mature spiritually and start doing the better thing, every little time, every single choice where you chose to listen to the Christ voice, you allowed it more inside yourself. You were able to embody it more and more and more. This is why I don't go on and on and on anymore about the energies, because I realized that was falling flat. What you actually need to do is psychologically heal and mentally heal, and Carl Jung heal, Jordan Peterson heal, because that is going to give you the egoic strength, the strength of the human self, to listen to that Christ voice. And every time you listen to it, you embody it more and more and more and more and more. And the expansion probably never stops until, like Stephen said, you become the rainbow body, an angel on earth, fifth dimensional. And that's just that. I just had to say that.
No. Of course, and I'm vibing. I'm sold. One of the biggest things that I've always felt, I mean, even talking about the walk-in thing, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I think it gets overused, because one of the biggest things we have to accept is a lot of us were born this way. A lot of us were born the way we are. It was merely just the remembrance and the realization of that fact that came into play. And that's one of the biggest things where I'm just like, even talking about ego, like how you were talking about, I don't want to sound egotistical. I think what we need to do, and I mean this in the best way, is, we need to understand what being egotistical means. Being empowered from an aspect of yourself, like saying, I am embodying Christ energy, is not egotistical. It's not. But what would make it egotistical is, I am embodying Christ energy. I'm holier than thou and better than you. That is what's the meme that was floating around? I showed it on my show before, where it's the dude who's like,
I know the
my
one.
ego. so I'm better than everybody else now.
Yeah, yeah.
and that's what it is. But that's what, to me, being egotistical about it is. And of course, we see that showcase itself all throughout our community. We're not going to name names, but I'm sure both of us can think of a couple people right off the top of our heads at this point, who kind of showcase this behavior and showcase this kind of attitude. But no, being empowered about an aspect of yourself, I think this comes with a lot of the shame conditioning that we experience as a human collective, because we have been conditioned to be shameful about ourselves from our upbringing. And how this happens is because from the day we're born, we're conditioned to always look without. We look without for happiness. We look without for validation. We look without for love. And what this kind of does is this causes what I call the subconscious shame factor that a lot of our human collective carries with it. We have to have shame about ourselves. So I think that's where the mistake and the cross up between actually and truly being egotistical and actually being self-empowered, this is where it gets blurred, because you can be empowered about yourself, you can love yourself, you can validate yourself, and all of these amazing things without being egotistical. What makes it become egotistical is when you begin to think you're better than everybody because you have done this work and that you have had these realizations and things like that. And that's one of the biggest things I say, dude, I'm in, yes, I woke up in 2008, whatever. But in all honesty, I'm still in the same shoes as y'all. I don't have this all figured out. Even after 17 years, I don't have this all figured out. New things reveal themselves to me on a daily basis. Like, these new layers of this remembrance, this quote unquote awakening that we're going through reveal themselves to me on a daily basis. So, there's a difference between being empowered and having that ego. And, saying that we are embodying Christ is not an egotistical thing. And, I know there are people who might feel that way, and that's unfortunate because, we have to have self-empowerment for ourselves. One of the biggest things you've heard me talk about a lot, Diana, is the destroying of the external savior complex. And, since we're talking about Christianity on this episode here, we see a lot of people look at Christ as an external savior. My question to you is, why don't you look at him as an internal one? One that is within you, that you are capable of, because you're muted. Sorry, you're muted.
Of course. No, I was going to say, it's funny because you mentioned that earlier and I actually wrote it down. I forgot. So you could think of him like a savior, as much as if you were about to fall off a cliff and somebody saved you, they're your savior. But what good does it do you to worship them forever? And do you think that guy's going to want you to follow them around and at their feet and freaking worship them your whole life? No, they'll be like, I saved your life so you could go live it. Live it the best way you can. Pay it forward. Be a good person. Like, that's just what average Joe would say. You know what I mean? So why would Jesus want you to worship him? Yes, I would say he's a savior to 100%. He's like, it's like he saved humanity from falling off a cliff. He saved humanity. That's huge. Absolute respect and honor and embodiment of that energy. That's actually, like, when you're honoring that energy, that's more powerful than worship. Is a loosh fest. Worship is the same as what you guys are now calling corn. You are throwing away your energy and just handing it off, when instead you could be embodying that, because your worship is taking away what's in your natural essence. Where if you just embody the Christ, the middle pillar path, like that whole thing, which is treat your neighbor as yourself. If you go, the all is the all and we're all the same person, that's kind of like a duh issue. Like treating everybody like they are you because they are you. And that's where your mind can really explode when you imagine that. And that's why Christ is here to clean it all up, because the frequencies are so tangled and everything is so, and he is the pinnacle of a balanced energy, that Heros Gamos, because it is so vital, because we are supposed to be just one. There is no male, female. The all of the all is just a one. It's just the both. And then he started with, you say he, because saying it feels rude, but like it started splitting and splitting, like the cells dividing, but it got tangled. And that Christ is the Heros Gamos. It is the united self of both together. It is the androgyny. It's the purity, the perfection and everything, but it does not need worship. It needs embodying.
Oh, exactly. Well, that is it is a, as you say, a loose harvest, because what it does is it externalizes our source of power. Anytime we externalize our internal power, we're ultimately giving it away, and that's something we don't want to do during these times, because to be sovereign, and worshiping just destroys what being sovereign truly means. Because if you're trying to be a sovereign human being, you're not following anybody's word or exactly what they're doing or anything, like they're not saying to you jump and you're going how high. A sovereign person, if somebody goes jump, the sovereign person goes, why do I need to jump? Like what is the point of jumping at this point in time? So that's what you're doing, is you're placing a medium between yourself and the divine. When you worship, you know what I mean? You're basically in a subconscious way going, I am giving away my power to this, whether it be an idol, whether it be some kind of medium. And you're basically shutting yourself off to that connection to the divine. And you're saying that you need something in order to achieve it. So like, that's one of my biggest quirks, with modern Christians today, is they think Christ is going to swoop down from the clouds and it's going to be my pet goat too. He's going to come in with his third eye awakened. And well, there's actually great symbolism, so I'm not going to use that term, but no, he's not going to swoop down from the clouds, and save us all from the evil that we're experiencing here, or the darkness that we're experiencing here on this planet. What I ultimately think Christ wants you to do is understand that he is within you and that you yourself can save not only yourself, but this planet, this existence that we're in, from the darkness that tries to take from us. So, this is one of the biggest things I think a lot of modern Christians are missing too, is they're giving it, they're looking at Christ as an external savior instead of an internal one. That's the swap that we need to see, being an internal savior within us, because it's an energy that has existed since creation itself. It has liberated us, or it has come back multiple times and tried to show us, our true nature. Tried to show us, the divine spark within us. And that's why I think when Christ returns this time, like I was saying earlier in the show, it's going to be in mass. It's going to be a mass energy, because, the higher beings and, the ions have learned that sending one person down isn't doing the trick. We need to have this happen in a very big way in order for people to get the point. And like I said, there can be no denying our worship if we have a lot of people waking up to this aspect about us. It then just moves straight into embodying. And then we would get those flesh angels. And I like that term, because that's ultimately what we're working towards here. We are trying to become that flesh.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's just growing, because Christ has resurrected, but Christ
okay. No worries.
Christ has resurrected already within us, and he's perhaps done that many times throughout the years, like Saint Teresa. I love her work, and Caroline Myss has kind of picked that up, and obviously John of the Cross. Like, we've had these saints that have come down and done huge things since Jesus, but yet the one thing that sticks in the Bible is something that's when they said, trust no other word than this is the only word. And it's like, no, because we've continued to grow, we've continued to expand, and that should be added in, and with discernment, because there's even stuff in the Bible that's like that phrase, like whenever you get channeled material, which a lot of the Old Testament is channeled material, I feel like they always have to give a taste of untruth, and that communication level is coming from Thoth. And Thoth, Mercury, Gemini, they're gonna lead some falsehoods. And if it's anything like the Pleiadians, they have to, although I also think it's to test our discernment. You could say it's darker beings. Perhaps they sprinkle it in during the bringing forth. But either way, the heart knows. When you are in that Christ-centered discernment, like, I went through the Bible and was like, nope, yes, 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 nope, yes, 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 nope. And then as I continued to study further, I have only ever seen things that validate the yeses and the nos of the Bible. And there is a ton of yeses, like there is. But basically the entire chapter of Deuteronomies is a no. Like that whole, like you can beat your wife with a stick this big
That's
and
definitely a no. Yeah, definitely a no.
yeah, only women can't cheat and all that. Hundreds of laws that are just like, what? I'm pretty sure the main laws were that's what I like when Jesus came in and he took all the old laws. He didn't even bother arguing with people and trying to, I mean, maybe he did, but what was written down wasn't that, oh, that was Satan's word. He just said, it's done. It's the old law is over. And when they would ask him, like, should we still circumcise? Should we still, and they would name things from the law because the law of the Judaism had so many rigid things that they had to do. And he was coming across that a lot. And he would say, if you're doing the things of the old law, you are still in the old law because the new law is released. And the only law that there needs to be is love thy neighbor as thine self, which the all of the all, if we're all the same person, that's self-explanatory, exactly what the teaching should be. And then when you're doing that, you naturally end up ascending up because everything just would grow and get better and grow and get better and grow and get better. And we have this natural evolution that happens because you don't just go from, oh, I'm going to treat them like how I treat myself. And then it's going to just immediately be Christ 5D life because you probably start this journey in a position of hating yourself because we are programmed to hate ourselves. We're brainwashed to hate ourselves. There is so much loosh harvesting happening and so much deep seeds into us from so many, many, many angles, not even to mention past life trauma, but there's that as well. And then so when you start treating your neighbor as yourself, what's it going to be? So you're not maybe going to be that perfect right away. You're going to be like a little nicer and a little nicer and a little nicer as you grow. Yeah, exactly. As you grow and stop hating yourself so much to the point where like you sit there one day and you're like, I don't think I hate myself anymore. Like weird. If you're self-honest, not everyone's honest with themselves. That's one thing I always had as like the emo person is I knew I hated myself. Like I knew it. There's a lot of people out there that seem super egotistical and think they're super amazing when the truth of it is they hate themselves. And that's what you find with a lot of the sheeple, a lot of the there's even Starseeds Not Awakened, a lot of these accounts that are going dark, and there's so many areas hating yourself can take you. But when we treat thy neighbor like ourselves, we stop hating. Because when we poo on someone else, because we might not even hate ourselves because of anything we did, technically. It can come from how we treat other people. So if you're a rude little toddler that yells at his mommy about changing a YouTube show, that can start to have all these. So that's like not that big of a deal, but it gets bigger and bigger because the next thing you do is something darker and then darker and then darker because the hate grows, but equally the light and the love can grow.
Well, the one thing I want to say that you brought up in the beginning, I want to touch on real quick is you talked about Thoth and the falsehood. So we know that Hermes and Thoth have a huge correlation with each other. So, you remember when we had Sarah on and she said she had beef with Hermes at that time. Yeah, one of the biggest things you're going to see on this evolution is you're going to come to find as you grow that a lot of information that you once thought was altruistic and beneficial might not be. I mean, we've seen the Metatron's cube issue surfacing a lot lately too. I mean, it started surfacing within the past year. Is Metatron a benevolent entity for us? Is this a benevolent energy, or is there a sense of control that's kind of being locked? With the real flower of life being, revealed and things like that. So we're seeing kind of this shift also in the spiritual realizations and a lot of the material that we used to look at, a lot of the old material. And we're starting to see that, maybe at a time this could have helped, but we're in a new age right now. And I mean, I don't like using that term because it immediately gets linked to the new agers. Hiker Trash, shout out for sure. I see everybody as me having another experience. That's what it feels like to me. Exactly. Yeah, I'm gonna get to that for sure. But that's something we have to understand too, because I see a lot of people in our community, they will clutch like the older material, almost in like a fundamentalistic way. They're like, clutch it. But it's like, dude, right now, and this is the one thing I'm going to say. We look at a lot of the spiritual doctrines here on this planet. There's no one that is absolutely 100% correct. And do you want to know why? At least in my opinion, that's because the real correct one is made by you. Okay, that is the why the you look at these pieces, and me being an omnist that I am, I see truth in them all. Don't get me wrong. I see truth in Christianity. I see truth in Hinduism. I see truth in Taoism. I see all of this truth. And like, yes, I might have some of these that I like a little bit more than others, the ones that resonate with me a little bit more. But as far as one containing the whole entire truth, that doesn't exist. And that's because we are supposed to make the true spiritual doctrine here. And that's what I think we're being called to do right now. We need to make a new one that is for these times. We live in a different age, this time of, I even go, back in the day, before the times of technology, if you were on this path, you can see how it would take lifetimes. You would have to get on this boat voyage, and this boat voyage might last like a month and a half. And then after this month and a half boat voyage, you finally get to Tibet. But now you have a week-long hike to the top of this mountaintop, to the top to this monastery, and you finally get there just to read this one book that took you almost half a year to get to, and so this is why, the spiritual ascension potentially in the past could have taken lifetimes because of the conditions that we were in, the environment that we're in. We live in a time now where we have access to these books that you would once have to take a boat and a half month voyage to get to and hike the Himalayan plateau to get to this monastery. We have them all at the access of our fingertips, so what we're looking at too right now is this accelerated spiritual evolution that we are. I'm hella grateful to be in this time being able to do this. I know a lot of you are out there too. So, I'll digress and I'll say that's why we constantly need to understand that the truth as we know it today may not be the truth as we know it tomorrow. And that's part of this process, that's part of this growing. So I'm with you. You talk about Hermes and Thoth and the falsehoods, Deuteronomy being an absolute no. It is an absolute no. There's a few books in the Old Testament that are absolute no's in my eyes.
The book of Job. Yeah.
Yes.
That's brainwashing you to take all the crap and not complain. And it doesn't even have, oh my God, I want to throw up thinking about that story. And that's used all the time in church. That story, and even on Christian content, all the time do they mention that story. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, if anyone, that was Lucifer and Satan talking, not God and Satan. That was Lucifer and Satan talking. I bet you $1 million, because their real God was Satan. Not even Lucifer. Lucifer's kind of cool and maybe a good guy, but he's like the badass good guy where it's like he does some dicey stuff.
Anti-hero. Right? That's exactly what we would call him. Anti-hero. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I felt some things there. His name says it too, the light bearer. And some people say he's also Christ. I don't know. I think three beings makes sense because we live in threes. But I forget why I started that point.
No. You're all good. One thing I want to touch on, and then I want to touch on the Christ Lucifer. You were talking about loving thy neighbor in that process. So yeah, ultimately, we have to love ourselves before we can truly love thy neighbor. I mean, even as Hiker Trash was saying, she sees everybody around her as another divine focal point, and that's how we do see it. And when you start to kind of understand that, and the only way to kind of understand that is to start practicing it, to start kind of, embodying it. Like, think of it this way, when you're interacting with a person, whether they're awake or asleep, you're looking at another subjective divine focal point. You are a subjective divine focal point yourself. You want the best for their experience. You want the best for their experience. And you want the best for them. That's starting with this, because you understand that in that sense, there's no difference between you and them. You're both of these specks of divinity having its own subjective experience here on this planet, which is ultimately one of the most beautiful things in all of this existence, and it should be looked at that way. And, as in turn, you'll begin to learn to love yourself through that too, because loving another person, and the way you would give love to yourself is ultimately that reciprocative relationship of loving yourself at the same time. So it's starting to put that into practice. Now, what you were saying about Lucifer and Christ, there's a reciprocating relationship there. I call it the Lucifer Christ Ouroboros. Because we look at Lucifer energy, right? And Lucifer energy it's not a bad energy, it's a needed energy. That's exactly what I'm going to say. And yes, a lot of us kind of take dips in it. The Lucifer energy is the revolutionary energy too. It is the awakening energy. It's a part of the awakening energy. And but here's the thing: if we're even looking at it from the consensual term, Lucifer is the tester of humanity. He tests us, and he gives us these tests. And ultimately, the time, a lot of us star seeds and us angel seeds, we've no offense to witches when I say this, we've dug through the ditches and we've burned through the witches, man. We've been through some shit in our life that pushed us towards that light. So Lucifer tests us with these struggles and these trials and tribulations that we undergo as a human being, in our development and our growth. And ultimately what that does is that pushes us to the other side of the Ouroboros, to the Christ side of the Ouroboros. And we get there and we're like, holy crap. We're onto something now. And that's why, because, we go through this. Not everybody's awakening came from darkness. I get that. There are some people who just woke up just because they woke up, and that's an amazing thing. But for a lot of us, we went through some dark shit. We got those tests. We got those trials. We got all of this stuff that shoved us into this light, the energy of Christ. So, and that's why I do not think Lucifer is the real Satan. I think Yaldabaoth is the real Satan.
Yeah, and we mentioned middle pillar earlier, which is a big deal. But so for people to get this, and this is the tree of life concept that you take things in and you embody it as your being. And Lucifer is the one side. It's the side of spirit. And Satan, or the other guy you just said, that's the energy of of physicality, of material, of the densest of the dense. And then Lucifer is the energy of the high. Both have their own place. There is a world within Satan that is fine. They're happy. They enjoy being, the name, the Draconians. Is that the one that are said to be two-dimensional and live? It starts with a D. It's two-dimensional and they live the densest of dense worlds. That's past what we can see, but it's also here on earth. And they're happy about it. We wouldn't want to live in that existence, but that is their existence. And that's just how they know it. Right. And then that's what Christ is. It's that the two coming together. It's the embodiment of the two. It's the spirit with the physicality. It's why it's what we would want in this dimension, but in a higher dimension, the Lucifer might just be a brother. It's not even that he would even be a higher being at that point, and you can go past him. But in this reality, too much spirit can lead to atrophy, really. But Lucifer especially would lead to kind of a burnout, and drugs and alcohol and all that are connected to Lucifer. So it has its ways where it can go wrong because it's getting you to spirit. But if you abuse it, and then Satan, why Lucifer's a good guy right now is because the world is so physical, because the world is way closer to being Satanized, because of the Jewish Bible, because that God was Satan, like the Ahriman, that was Satan. So we have this huge, our society is rooted in that, right? So our society is rooted in Satanism, where Lucifer, he was named as the bad guy and thrown away, and nobody thought about checking if that was two different people. And it was. So if you that's why Lucifer could be used to fix, it's one of the laws of the Hermetics, the laws of polarity, but you can use that to get to the opposite side. So if you're in hate, that actually means you love that person and you could jump to love. But if you think, I don't know, they smell weird, that's not going to translate to love, because that's a totally different thing. Like you're always
Absolutely.
going to go on the like matching like in that polarity stream. So Satan and Lucifer are the same thing, but two different sections of the polarity. And they are that thing that was probably split apart to make this dimension, because that's why we're a holy trinity. Like it took all of existence and split itself, right? And that's why, again, why Christ is so important, because it's us staying in the balance of the two. It's a living embodiment of itself. And it's the way shower, quite literally, because as we go through that path, like we were saying earlier, how you treat your neighbor like yourself, treat your neighbor like yourself. It gets better, it gets better, it gets better. If you notice, Christ never gives you, like, this is why I get suspicious of people that have like all the future information laid out, because you can get hints. I get psychic information too, but it's always like open. It's always comforting. It's always like, it's never an, oh no, this is definitely going to happen. It's like, it's the next step. It's the next step. It's the next step. And Christ is going to be giving you the next step that you want to take, and then it just keeps unfolding in that manner as you stay in aligned purity of that Christ energy versus the millions of
Diana, you froze up. But one thing I wanted to say real quick that I resonated with you on was when you said Lucifer with the drugs and alcohol. That hit deep. And one of the things when we imbibe, like you were saying, Lucifer is like a balancing energy. You're right. But when we fall too much into that Lucifer energy, those are the people in our community who are like, I don't want to be a human anymore. I'm done with my humanity. I want to go back to the higher realms. And that's when they've been over imbibing or overusing that Lucifer energy. You're back now though, so keep going. Yeah.
No, you can keep that going. That was a good stream, because you're right. Like that energy of saying, I don't want to be human anymore. That's a Lucifer energy. And then versus the I don't care about God, I want a Maserati or whatever, that's Satan. And like you got the two, and both are bad. And they can even work together, which is like even worse bastardizing when they're together.
I've seen that occur.
Yeah, that's the darkest of the dark. Oh God, that's your deepest and darkest. I don't even want to say the words, cancel, nullify, because it's the darkest. And you don't want them to team up.
No, not in that aspect also. Well, too, because like you can there are people out there, and those are the people that are dark magicians. When we start to kind of dive into that territory, who are utilizing both that aspect of Lucifer, that Lucifer energy, and that satanic energy as well. Yeah, those are the dark magicians. And like we've seen that uptick kind of people, like you were showing me the whole Quora thing, people like trying to get into black magic and dark magic and
en masse. It was scary. Like, what?
It's like,
I don't see that on YouTube. I don't see that on Twitter. I don't even see it on Instagram much, but I don't see it there. And all of a sudden, Quora is this pit of darkness. And I used to use it when it first came out, and I was like, what happens? Seriously.
I had no idea that it would become that pit of darkness. But no, I mean, and one of the reasons we see that, I think, is, I mean, you look at our secular civilization. Now, not everywhere. I mean, I'm mostly talking about Western civ at this point, because when you look at Eastern civilization, they're not exactly secular. Even though they might not be devout believers of the spirituality in their religion, they still hold like this moral compass, or this realization that, like, hey, this might not be for me in my lifetime to explore this trajectory, but it's definitely there. I know it's there. And this is like the mentality we see in a lot of the Eastern civilizations when it comes to approaching things like black magic. But a lot of the westernized civilizations, especially, Canada and the US, highly secular, the belief in a divine being, is a no. You are just a coincidence. You came from a monkey, you evolved, and when you die, you're worm dirt. But what we've seen is kind of the rays of, this secular philosophy, or this secular spirituality. Like, you have these individuals that they believe in energy, like, they believe in frequencies and things like that, but they don't believe in a overall divinity of some kind, or they're negating that very aspect of this whole experience. And that's kind of what leads people down that road, in my opinion. You have this, I mean, even the nihilistic atheists and I'm being true, a lot of the atheists that call themselves atheists now are not true atheists. They're nihilistic atheists, and this is like a special group. But you have a lot of these nihilistic atheists that are starting to imbibe in satanic philosophy, or they're starting to, they believe in energy and things like this, and it can reflect our environment, because yes, there are physical things that they can look at that showcase this, how energy interacts with our environment. I mean, I can think of about like 10 physical examples offhand. I mean, the electrical arc being a huge example. We don't see electricity, we can't visually look at it, although I can see magnetic fields from it. I've gotten pretty good at that. But but when the electrical arc occurs, something that is typically unseen now becomes seen. So there's examples of this. So that's where I think a lot of this has started to come from. And I mean, the parasite class doesn't help either. I mean, they're throwing out, I mean, when I first started this back in 2008, they were still doing it, but it was on a much subtle level. Like, you had to know what you were looking for, and you had to know what you were looking at in order to kind of see what was going on. But as of late, they've thrown all their fucks out the window on being subtle. With a lot of this symbolism that they throw out, this dark symbolism and things like that. And who's to say that this isn't influencing people down that road as well? Again, symbols are a higher dimensional language. We look at sigils, we look at a lot of these other different symbols that have been used in ceremonial magic, these symbols that are used in a lot of our spiritual traditions. Like, this is a higher dimensional language. Our subconscious mind and our unconscious mind are going to pick up on these symbols and their meanings if our conscious mind ever does pick up on it. And you have to, that's something you have to train yourself to do, to pick up on these symbols and things like that. And anybody can do it. It's not, a hard thing. It just takes the will and the want to learn how to do it. But yeah, no, I think that's also kind of having an effect on it as well. But that's, to me, is what we see, that, I'll digress and say, the dark magic and the black magic is that Lucifer and that Satan energy working together, kind of like you said.
Yeah, 100%. And I just want to jump in before I forget my point there, because that was one of the things that brought up this topic to Christianity. Was I only got to see the first half an hour because one of the kids got bad and I had to go to the car. But the rest of the family got to watch it. They said it was very good. So recommend it. Apparently Charles Dickens wrote it. And I guess they can't lie about that, because I was like, really? It's the original story of the Bible, but written by Charles Dickens, and he incorporates Scrooge into the opening, and it's made very entertaining for kids. So I would recommend seeing it. It's made by that Angel Studio, the same people that made The Chosen, and this proved they're awakened, because I suspected it. They have the Flower of Life. They have the Flower of Life. Like, hello. And I only got to watch for maybe 20, half an hour. So there might have been more.
That's still good.
Because the Flower of Life is the known awakening symbol. It's seen throughout all of the world in all these various cultures, and it's something that just shoots codes right into us. Like, all these symbols that you're talking about, they're codes, and we unpack those codes regardless of whether or not we're consciously aware of it, and it adds to the unfolding. Like, sometimes, like, when you get a divine thought, you're like, how did this come? Like, especially before you make a direct aligned connection with a higher self being, those symbols are how they get through to you. Because when you're in that lower satanic space, you are dead in the self. Dead. This is why come alive in the name of Jesus, as many songs say, come alive. Because when you're in that full, dense satanic place, you are dead. You are dead. Like, because your soul's not connected. It's sitting there waiting, but it's not really that involved. Sometimes it's able to get a whisper through to you, and usually that's done with symbols. That's why learning all the various symbols and what they mean can help you unpack it, and your dreams will start handing them to you more and more. But anyways, like, so you'll get this, you'll see the Flower of Life or the pentacle behind me, and then you won't even recognize it. but then you'll all of a sudden get a divine thought later in the day that unpacks itself through synchronicities. And now you'll be wiser and you'll know something because that symbol came to you. So I have symbols. I have a tray of all the or a plaque of all the alchemical symbols. Up, which makes me nervous because some of them can be used for nefarious purposes, but technically they should all be able to be used for good. It's just because some people will bastardize anything. And this is what I've been in and out of the Merkaba because of that, because I'm like, good, evil, good, evil. But the other day, one was imprinted on my hand after Stephan made a symbol for something we're working on. And I was like, oh my God. So like, that was such a sign. And I remember I told you I'm getting a tattoo and I had this Ankh thing with eyeballs I was going to get. I'm like, no, I'm going to get the Merkaba tattooed right there where the divine stuck it on my hand. And that's it. I'm in, because I keep going in and out and in and out. Because last time I was out because Ashiana Dean said it was bad. And then Sarah told me about her. So it's like, and I trust Sarah. And it's just like your mind can get so twisted in these things. And even with Christ, like we said at the beginning of the episode, but you just have to listen to what keeps repeating itself to you and then tune in to what follows. Was that good? Was that bad? Like they say, when it comes to emotions, there's only two: pleasant, unpleasant. So you can do the same thing with trying to use your sovereign discernment. This is how you grow your sovereign discernment, and just break down everything to its smallest counterpart: good, bad, like in every little moment that unfolds within everything. And then you start to work this stuff out for yourself, to trust symbols, to trust yourself, to trust the Christ space, the words that come to you. Because as you also open up your being, the information that comes to you doesn't just get better good. It also, you'll get dark. I get the weirdest dark stuff that comes into my head now that's just horrible, but like I'm able to just like let that go, like, whoa, like rude, like that was somebody else, because like that's insane. That's why they say your thoughts are not yours. So even the good ones aren't necessarily yours, but you can obviously, you want to listen to those ones and then but still forgive the bad ones. And it's just, it's a journey, and that's where the journey comes in to the ascension spiral up.
Excuse me. Absolutely. You know, one of the things I want to bring up is that bastardization of symbols, and that's why I sent you that song from the AT Aliens, and it was called Alchemy. And you know, I was looking at these symbols on the cover of the album, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. Like I'm somewhat getting like a mixed vibe though from them, and but no, exactly kind of what you're saying. You know, it's ultimately up to our discernment when it comes to experiencing these symbols and it comes to experiencing these thoughts, like you were saying as well. I can't tell you, I'll have thoughts in my mind sometimes, and this is when I do think that, you know, I could have negative entities like messing with me. And I've had these thoughts, especially in the evening time, like as I'm getting to, you know, ready to unwind, and I'll be like I'll be listening to this and I'm like, dude, this is not me. Like, you know, this is definitely not me. And then you know, when I have these good thoughts as well, it's, you know, I know that this is not me, but I'm listening to this though, because this is kind of like helping me point myself in the right direction. So the one thing I'm going to say when it comes to, you know, being discernment, not only about our thoughts and symbols, just see the context that these symbols are being utilized in. Number one, I mean, are they going to be showcasing? Yep, here we go. Let's take a look.
But that's what's always happening. You know what
Exactly.
I mean?
Yes,
It's probably many of both. It's probably not just two. It's many of both, and some are in the gray. That's why you really have to get discerning, because some are gray, where it's like a slight variation, and it's probably personal to you. Like that could be good for someone else, but bad for you. So you really have to tune in, because that's always happening. We, the Pleiadians, say like we're primed to take in signals. We're signal taker-inners.
Well, that's too. I mean, because you look at this, I mean, this, you know, that we see this common symbol, this archetype, you know, that's been in our society and things like that. You know, of the angel sitting on one shoulder and the devil sitting on the other, you know, and that's like the deepest polarity of it all. To me, it's like when I experience it, it's like a single energy, but different aspects of it that are kind of like showcasing itself. I mean, you even look at the way, like, you know, the chakra system is presented. I've seen some like bastardizations of the chakra system over on like these spiritual posters or things along there, especially new age, in the new age category of things like that. So No, it is. It's about really it's going to be subjective to each individual person, the way that we perceive this symbolism and the way that we look at it, but ultimately see the way that it's being presented. I mean, a great example of this, you were talking about the Merkaba earlier. So like, we look at the Star of David, the star tetrahedron. It has both positive and negative aspects to it, like, and yeah, I mean, the swastika being like the most famous bastardized symbol of them all. When we look at the Buddhist swastika, or a lot of the not the Nazi Aryan swastikas, but the true Aryan
That's why I
swastika.
laughed when you said that the first time, because the Aryan race, they weren't white. So what was Hitler? I got to be the Aryan race. Like the original Aryan race wasn't white. It sounds like so.
They no, and that's so it's really interesting about that whole thing is so. I'll dive into that next when it comes to Hitler and his opinion on that. But like, you look at the Buddhist or the real Aryan swastikas, and they're not at a tilt. It represents enlightenment, ascension, the four cardinal directions. It was a very positive.
In our sky,
symbol.
it's an astrology symbol. It's real,
Exactly.
and it's mostly positive. I actually haven't heard anything bad about that swastika, like under its other names. Yeah,
exactly. No, that swastika is 100% positive. And then, but we look at the Nazi version of it. What they did is they symbolized it with the color red. They surrounded it with the color red, and they put a tilt on it. So what does the color red do? It makes us anxious. It makes our blood pressure rise. Like, you know what I mean? It puts us in almost a survival mode when we're looking at the color of red.
Sorry, everyone.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, we look at the root chakra. Our root chakra's red too. It's not a negative color in and of itself.
It's how the root's the easiest one that can go bad because of how close to the density it is, but it also can hold the most physical power because of how dense it is. So it can go either way.
It is. It's how it's presented exactly. And I mean, that's why you look at a lot of fast food restaurants, and they have red everywhere. I mean, every single one. And, it's meant to drive up your, oh, I want to eat, is basically what they're trying to get you to do. But, and then the swastika was tilted. So it was rotated out of its original position. So, when you're using the color red in that context to cause anxiety, to cause fear, to cause survival mode, and then you have this once beneficial symbol that you inverted, that you twisted, that even goes with the pentagram. So like, the pentagram was actually a Christian symbol back in the day too. It stood for the 5 wounds of Christ. There was actually the pentagram is a very positive symbol. But what happened through inversion and Satanism, it got inverted, it got flipped, and that connotation actually is what symbolizes the darker aspects of the pentagram. So, it is. We just have to take a look at now. If let's say, like, the difference here is you see the Nazi swastika, it's inverted and it's surrounded by the color red. But then, you take a look at the Buddhist swastika, a lot of times it's surrounded by very light and vibrant colors. You see a lot of blues, you see like a lot of indigos. And, we know that blue is a color that causes calmness, serenity, peace. We look at indigo, the Ajna chakra, representing the third eye, these higher colors. So this is another key thing you can look at when you're looking at a certain symbol as well. See what color is presented around it. Not to say that, the lower triangle colors such as red, orange, and yellow are bad, but look at, the way it's being presented.
They come with a certain sense of responsibility because like that thing I said was SpongeBob, but the great responsibility comes, or great power comes great responsibility, because it's true. Like exactly. You need to know that, like, because if you're driving a red car, at least here, you get charged extra insurance because it's been known that red cars, and my van is red cars get like they can, because it'll inflame the other driver. So you're right. And then Trump was known to only wear red ties for that reason.
I swear he's a master Kabbalist. I that rumor started to surface what was it, like mid to end 2024, that Trump was a practicing master Kabbalist. And, you know, a lot of the photos of him with his master had kind of surfaced here and there. But downright, I kind of believe he could very well be. I mean, even just kind of what you're talking about, you know, with the red tie, you know, on how
He
that
knows his stuff.
color.
Yeah. Whether or not
Yeah,
he's good
yeah.
or bad, he is aware. And I think that
Oh,
helps
he's
though.
definitely aware.
I think that helps because I think the other presidents were just stooges. And I don't think he's a stooge. But and I think he might save the world just for his own ego. But we'd have to
That
trust it. Yeah. And we'd have to trust that he's going to have the right ideas because that's so we're trust. He is smart, but he's done very much shady stuff in the past. So we know it's very likely in the future, but people change. Although he doesn't
I
say
think you brought up a very valid point, man. The man is so caught up in his ego. He would just save the world for the ego. He would. But I can, you know, in that point, like, you know, ego being our ally, like it kind of is though, when you look
I've
at
turned
it.
my ego into that. I've
Yeah.
actually turned my ego into that. Like my ego used to be set on brooding and poor me. Now my ego is obsessed with saving the world, but saving it humbly because it's so like it's literally it causes me very little problems anymore. Like it's not like I killed it. I've just aligned it with my purpose.
The only time, exactly, I'm in the same shoes as you with that. The only time, you know, where it gets a little snippy with me is like, you know, the whole things where it's like the controlled awakening and everything going on, and it's like, you know, my ego is kind of pops up, and it's like I refuse to believe my civilization lacks this much of a backbone to be able to handle the truth in its full context. And then my higher self comes in. It's like, but bro, like my higher self is like, it's chill but no chill. Like at the same time,
I,
it's like,
I agree with your ego.
it's like it is.
Because I was like, I feel like God made me the low of the low. I wasn't like the lowest, but I was pretty low. Like for just a normal person, like as low as a normal person can be of just like, you suck. Like you could be doing better, but you're not. You're bare miniming, can't say that word. You are just not, you're scraping by because it's the easiest way, because they didn't give a about anything, because there was nothing, you know what I mean? So you could take that person and then change them. It just shows me that any of the rest of you can change too, because I was the person that would sit around going, why do you have energy and I don't? Why can you do that and I can't? Well, you know, like I used to see absolutely everybody is more successful than me. And because I am like of normal intelligence, like my intelligence is there. Like usually like lower people, like they're kind of special. And it's like, you know, that's different. Where I was very smart. I was always smart. So like that wasn't the reason that I was just phoning in life. So if I could pick it up, if I see somebody else that's of moderate, higher intelligence, why aren't you knowing better? Why aren't you doing better? Like I completely agree, because there's no excuse, not at all.
I'm 100%, and that's where, you know, and then I'm with you, but yeah, my higher self will chime in and go, bro, remember, it's emotional programming. It's very sensitive. If you rip it out too quick, they're gonna melt down. But I do resonate with that, because I deal with that too. That's one of the it doesn't come from a place of animosity. It doesn't come from a place of anything, but I see some of me in you, and I know you're capable of this. And you know, and it comes from a caring.
Yeah.
It comes from a caring standpoint. Although it sucks, because even though it comes from a caring standpoint, it's never
like
going to be taken that way.
Yeah, I've been
it's
told.
never
Yeah,
gonna be taken that way.
yeah. It's like, okay, I'm sorry, I care, and like it's a Sagittarius way to just say the truth, and then the truth can be hurtful sometimes, and it's like because I'm willing to let people think I'm rude if it's like going to shake something within them. That's like because sometimes it's just saying the truth will hurt people, and it's like we got to get more comfortable with that baby step to baby step, because I know if the divine was just to open up the frequency, apparently they'd short circuit and die, something along those lines, where if we just say the truth, we might be pushing them into a dark night of the soul, but like it's for their own good.
The hardest lessons I had ever learned in my life, the lessons that pushed me to be the person that I am today, and that made me really kick my healing journey into high gear and push myself, they were never sugar coated. You know, they were never they came with a searing burn. especially, like as big of a health and fitness enthusiast as I am today. Back in the day when I was overweight, how many times, being called a freaking tub of lard at the swimming pool when you're a kid and all of this shit, or,
My
even in
dad
your
called me the same thing. Literally,
yeah,
Abelard. He
yeah.
had a singing way of saying it too.
Oh my god, but see, exactly, man. And like, that's a stinging thing. That's a stinging. But what that showed me I needed to do is I needed to take better care of myself. I needed to, kick my ass into high gear, develop a healthy relationship with food, one that's not gluttonous, one that's not eating for emotional comfort, one that's eating for fuel and, to perform and things like that.
You know what's
Building.
interesting? I
Yeah.
want, because that's important for people to know. It's because we both got called the same thing, except you took your lesson and made it good. You made that good. You took the best of it. I took that lesson because I wasn't big. I was the same. I hadn't had kids yet. I was fine. I wasn't overweight or anything. Did I have rippling abs? No. I was like a standard issued weight person, right? So, but my
Mhm.
dad's just that kind of person, and he didn't want us to ever get fat. And I liked cream cheese, and he wanted to make sure I knew how bad it was. And he used to tell my mom if she got fat, he'd divorce her. Like, he has kept me thin because, and he means it with love, and he's still that kind of person. But I took that and went and got an eating disorder. So, like this, and then I got freakishly skinny. I went down to 97 pounds
Oh
before
man.
I was like, I look like Skeletor. And like went back the other way because these things, like, you could take it the wrong way. And I didn't get right with my eating. And that was because of my own health. Like, because I didn't exactly eat good. I just made sure not to eat a lot. And I didn't get good with my eating until I was forced to with health issues. Like, some people, like you were saying, need to go through the darkest. And I made it so I was like barely moving and so sick. Where I could have listened earlier. I could have said, Dad, actually, I'm perfect, and learned to love my body instead of going dark with it, right? Because we can take all these lessons, but how you implement them can go either way.
Oh, exactly, man. And that's where, I call it, emotional transmutation, man, and that's something, I did the whole special Tuesdays on that, the spiritual alchemy. It's understanding that this emotion that you're feeling, it feels like pain. Exactly. You feel this hurt, you feel this sadness. But again, an emotion is energy, right? You have to look at this feeling that you're having as a source of energy, as a source of fuel. And each person is going to get there in their own way. It's the want and the will to want to pursue this kind of spiritual alchemy that's going to get you there. But it's, this emotion that you're feeling is energy, right? And you have two choices with this energy, this experience that you're having. You can take control of it. You can use it to help push you to that better place that you're looking to get to. In my case, it was the constantly being called out about my weight. There were other instances that I experienced where I felt weak and helpless, and I didn't have the strength or the know-how to get me out of these situations. And I remember, even as a young 20-year-old kid, sitting there with myself, is like, are you ever going to let this happen again? No, you're going to take this pain and you're going to fucking change it, and you're going to use this pain to catalyze you to get to that place where you're no longer weak, to where you feel good about yourself, to where, you feel strong and you feel this confidence that you deserve to feel. This is your first choice with this energy, this emotion that you're feeling. And then the second choice is to let it completely encompass you, lose control of it, and to allow it to tear you down with its energetic frequency, like, especially the sadness, the depression, all of the things that we experience during these dark nights of the souls. And that's the two choices we have when we're approached with this. And the alchemist, all right, the alchemist is able to take, you could throw absolute shit at an alchemist, and it's good, and that alchemist is going to turn that shit into gold.
Yeah. Well,
And
we are alchemists. That's what we do.
Exactly.
Carl Jung. If you're following any Carl Jungness or Christ, you're an alchemist.
Exactly, 100%. Like, and that's the true power in this. Is understanding that. And I'm glad I found a way to describe it better, because I've been like looking for the words to describe this better. And I'm glad they're coming to me right now. You have to treat the emotion you're feeling as a source of energy. Imagine it as energetic food, right?
Mhm.
And that's the best way to describe it. Now you can take this energetic food and you can do something good with it, and you can be like, all right, this person said I needed to improve upon this, but not in the best way. Let's take this energy and improve upon this. Let's do this for me, so I
Let's hear it
know
like
that.
the divine said it. That's a trick I do.
Yes.
Like whatever Stephanie said, like if she's a biatch, she's a biatch. Shoo her away. Because have you ever said something and you're like, why did I just say that? I've had that many times. There was a couple months ago, I let the door fall on someone, and I'm a door opener. And I'm like, why did I do that? And then I was like, oh, maybe it was her karma. And I was just answering it. And it's like, that's how it is when we hear people say stuff to it. Instead of breaking down and overanalyzing why Stephanie said that, just go, why did the divine say that? And then you'll find answers actually
That's
unfold. Instead of a negative spiral, you'll have a positive spiral.
that's absolutely awesome. And yes, I agree with you 100%. Why did the divine say that? Because one of the biggest things, and one thing you've heard me talk about a lot, the divine is constantly communicating with us always, but that's the thing, is we have to open ourselves to how it's communicating with us. It does have its moments, though, where it does literally communicate with us in that way, and it will do it through a person. Now, if it's one of the ways it'll do it, and I'm sure all of you out there listening have experienced this. Have you ever had that loved one or that best friend that said just exactly what you needed to hear, that got you out of this sticking point that you were in, and you look at them and you're like, oh my God, thank you. That's the divine taking a literal stance in communicating with you. It is not going to drop down out of the higher densities with a neon sign and be like, hey, like I'm talking to you, because that defeats the point of the learning process that we're undergoing here. And the divine will communicate with you in harsh ways too, if there's things about yourself that you need to change. And that's kind of with me, with my weight and other things as well. And that's how I started to take it. I would be like, instead of getting absolutely offended at what I heard, I would sit there and I'd be like, okay, what's the divine trying to tell me right now? Like, what is it trying to show me that I need to work on, so I can get myself to a better space and get myself to the next level? And I promise you, if you take that perspective in your healing, you're going to be almost unstoppable when it comes to the growth and the progress that you're going to experience. You're going to be freaking hashing out and not getting rid, but healing your traumas at an accelerated rate, because you're taking the communication, again, and like even what we're saying, we're all these subjective divine focal points. That focal point could be resonating to you a message that you need to hear, and it might not, it might not feel good at the time, and that's the first thing we have to understand. But being the alchemist is understanding that, yes, I might not be feeling good about what's just being said, but what do I need to learn from this? Like, what do I need to improve? What do I need to change so I can fix this aspect of myself? I can heal this aspect of myself. And that's the champion mindset when it comes to healing. I mean, bottom line, and it's not don't get me wrong. I know it's easier said than done. We are humans. We have emotions. We feel things,
I would say, and because this is also like just learning. I like what she said there.
I know. Hiker Trash is doing great in the comments today.
Right? I use Twitter to purposely trigger myself to seek out all those little boogers hiding in me. It worked pretty well, lol. Yes, and looking for triggers is so key, because the truth is, and that's why I love that fire heart emoji and the term the alchemical fire or the hell fire, because it's the same thing, because it feels like freaking hell. But what it takes is wrangling that ego. And I had an episode of it years ago, and it was so profound. And it opens so much wisdom to me, because a lot of what I do solo is almost channeling. I just tap in. So it's a lot of time like, wow, and I'm learning too. And that was riding the bull
of the ego, because you do. It's like a wild stallion bull. And we're both, I'm Taurus rising and he is a Taurus. So, very Taurusy, both of us. And then my mom's a Taurus and my old best friend was a Taurus. So I'm very surrounded by that energy, because that bull symbology is so on point with the ego. Because when you first start, it's wrangling a bull. So just learn that that's what it's about. There's this part of you, and then it'll feel like it's dying. It'll tell you it's dying. It'll tell you to kill yourself. It'll tell you all kinds of effed up stuff, but you just wrangle that bull and she'll calm down. She'll calm down. And then every time you continue after with trying to listen to the higher self, in that ego bull fires up again. Oh, you just possibly can't, because it's going to be stuck in the narratives. It's going to be stuck in your own narratives, in societal narratives, in your relationship narratives. It's going to be it's a complete matrix. There always is matrices, but the ego is a complete matrix program that is updatable. And every time you wrangle the bull, you update it, and it gets easier and easier and easier. And now if I have an ego issue, let's say it's an ego issue I'm surrounded in, it's something spiritual. It might be a little like you feel a little bit, but let's say it's an olden day ego. And I'm arguing with one of my siblings about our childhood, because there's 4 of us and some of us have varied opinions. And it's like, it won't even matter, but you can find your extra ego with your siblings. And that one will be huge, because old patterns of arguing with siblings can come up, and the bull might be right back to the old space. So like there'll be old stuff you can find where the bull is just as strong. So wherever you're working on is where it'll get easier and easier and easier. And eventually, as you continue on in life, hopefully you unpack all the areas, and that bull, because the ego is always going to stay, but it could be as easy as just taking a deep breath and you're done. You're through it. It's over. Versus olden day you being like, I'm gonna kill you, and like it really does get easier. But if you're in an older state, or you find an old ego trip, just wrangle the bull, just go through it, because otherwise you're in for a longer journey. It's a lot easier to just jump on and ride it out in that moment and be like, we are going to go through the alchemical fires and unpack it. Might require unpacking. You'll get epiphanies, you'll get downloads. It'll be extremely, extremely worth it. Crying helps people. There's so many things, but just ride it.
For sure, for sure. Well, I'm going to give a shout out to all the Tauruses out there, because that's one of our biggest tests in this existence, is wrangling that bull and taming that bull. I actually had an episode recently where I kind of had to do that. My bull is very well tamed for the most part at this. There are some things, though, that do bring out that old aspect of it, and dealing with my father's side of the family is definitely one of those things that it's just it's like, oh my goodness. But I actually had that moment when I was on I had a conversation with him on the phone the other day, about his, his wife wasn't updating me about his health status and all of that. And I dealt with that, but I went ahead, I took the steps to get notified. But, we were going to have the conversation about it. And in that moment, I kind of thought to myself, I was like, and this was me, because I felt the bull getting ready. It started it was like took its paw and just kind of hit the ground. And, I was like, is that going to be productive?
Yes.
With my relationship with my father at this point, is this going to be a productive conversation? And of course, the higher me was like, absolutely not. It's not going to be a productive conversation. You've been down this road before. You definitely need to learn from it. And I was like, okay. So I was like, about the updates, I'm just gonna have Aunt Kathy update my aunt. I'm gonna have my aunt update me from here on out, because she seems to have the direct link. And he was like, okay, cool, all right, and all that. And I could have. That was my big moment of wrangling the bull, because what's happening to me is fucked up. Not being informed about my father being in the hospital, what's going on with him, and this is just what my dad's side of the family has done to me, my whole life in one way or another. But in that moment, I was like, it's no longer ruling you, dude. And it's not. So do what's going to be productive for you and your father's relationship in this conversation. Don't do something that's going to be counterproductive, because that's going to steal energy from you too. Because as soon as you do that, you're going to get off the phone and you're going to be asking yourself, you're going to be like, why did I just do that? That was so completely pointless. Like, you know, it's having that realization too during your triggers, you know, especially those major triggers where, you know, the bull shoots some smoke out of his nose and starts to take his paws on the ground and kick up the dirt and shit like that. You have to have that awareness of the bull during that time and be like, okay, if I cave to this bull, is this going to be productive for me in my life and in my improvement? Absolutely not. 9 times out of 10, when you cave to the bull, it's going to make you take some steps backwards. It just is what it is. Now, there are those very rare instances where you should cave to the bull, and that's if you're in some kind of danger. Or, you know, if there's something like that going on, then yes, in those instances, you know, the bull coming out is an act of self-preservation. And, you know, but it's also up to you at those times to have the awareness for those issues too. Not
And I would
every
say it's a
little.
frequency thing, because like if you mean like a righteous anger place, like because the bull has strength. So when I say like the ego bull, it's not necessarily the twin of the Taurus bull. It can just feel very similar because righteous anger is said to be a good thing. So like you have to just question yourself, am I just feeling right? Because that's what I've learned to feel through, especially being extremely fire, is is what is God-centered anger. And then it's the way you handle it. If my instinct is to be like, you're stupid, that's awful. That's the bad one. If my instinct is to be like, this is not right, this is unjust, this is so and such, and just pointing out truths in something that you're seeing is false, that's righteous anger. And then you're just saying the truth, pointing out the false, and leaving it at that. It's not getting personal. The getting personal is where you can. That's something the ego would do.
100%. No, and I'm glad you brought this up because this is something I want to squash. You know, we're allowed to have anger. Okay. You know, and this is the thing I think a lot of people is they negate their anger. There is such a thing as righteous anger, you know, and as many of you out there, I mean, who had your awakening, anger is what led to that. You know, you saw something that offended your soul pretty much, you know, and that led to your awakening. It's what we do with that anger that makes or breaks us. You know, it's if we carry it with us, which I used to do with a lot of things. And let me tell you firsthand, you're carrying an unnecessary weight with you wherever you go. You know, but it's what we do with that anger, and we can use that anger as fuel too. Think of it. If we talked about the energetic food, we talked about how your emotions are like a type of energetic food for you, energetic sustenance, right? Your anger is a really good example of that too. You know, you could be feeling anger about something. You know, I mean, I experience anger still. There's things, you know, I get angry about, but instead of sitting there and carrying that anger with me, I'm like, okay, what can I do to change this? Is there something in my power that I can do to change what's going on here? And ultimately we do have that power within us. So yeah, you know, there is righteous anger, there is divine anger. I would even say that's an aspect of Christ itself. You know, when we see that we are,
because it has the power of both. You can feel the alignment of it.
Yeah, it is. It's the alignment of it. And, you know, it's what we do with that anger that is going to make or break us. And
Ooh.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Heros Gamos. You in the anger will feel.
There you go.
Oh, good. Okay. You will feel both. The Heros Gamos in the anger. You will feel the righteous fire part is part of the masculine, but the compassionate going into the depths of the matter, even if it's darker, but just truth element, that's your feminine. And then the way you formulate your language will be a mesh of both. And that's like this. So the righteous anger is a Heros Gamos anger, a divine union anger, where it's not, I am super tough and you better believe me. Or the girl side would be like, oh, you know, like it's going to be the compassionate knowing of the emotions, but the firmness of the masculine, and then combined. That, I think, that just came to me, so that's why I had to jump in.
No, absolutely. And I agree with you on that, you know, and even Hiker Trash saying, you know, yeah, wrangling my anger has taught me to be more solutions driven. That's also the other thing about it too, is because, you know, that's a huge problem we still see in a lot of our community. We have these you and I talked about this on my show, the subconscious victim mentality.
Yes.
And a lot of that is because they let the anger break them. You know what I mean? They let it break you. And that even is lending credence to what Hiker Trash said. Wrangling my anger taught me to be more solutions driven. Absolutely. You're going to be able to have control over the energy of that emotion. And it's going to allow, and when you have, let me tell you something about having control of anger and control of your emotions. You're going to tap into the flow state by default because you're keeping that neutral mind. You're maintaining that neutral mind while you're experiencing this anger, this divine anger, this righteous anger. And what that neutral mind is going to do, it's going to acknowledge the emotion. It's going to acknowledge the emotion. It's going to acknowledge what's causing it. And what's going to happen if you're in that neutral mindset too, is it's going to start listing solutions. You're going to start getting this download of solutions to this thing that's making you angry. And that's why it's, like I said, I know it's easier said than done. I'm not saying all of this stuff.
Eventually it's not though. Eventually it is literally just easy. Eventually it is the better thing. And this is also, I want to jump in here with cannabis and psilocybin. This is where I had to. Honestly, like it was medicine. Once upon a time, I was a bonger and it was just like not sacred. But then I quit for years, especially during that Christian period and before that Christian period. But then after I came out of it, it was still I've only been back for like maybe 2 years tops, I think. But it's gentle. It's like vaping, but it's like because my anger was such a final piece to the puzzle, because I would be so in alignment all the time, but then when my anger came, it wasn't righteous. It was like a shame anger, and it would still need to be like, hidden. But when you're in alignment, and cannabis can help you through that, and then the way you do it, you learn, and then you copy that when you're not on the cannabis. Because now, like, I'm barely even ever having to it's just a joy thing. It's not like a medicine that I felt like I needed. Now it's just it just is.
Well, one of the things I want to say about cannabis too, and this is something why cannabis can be very helpful in that I'm agreeing with you, is because for all of you who, now don't get me wrong, I smoke cannabis still. It's an evening thing for me, because I know myself with the plant, and I know that if I use cannabis in the daytime, I'm going to neglect some of my responsibilities. So I save it for the evening. But nonetheless, have you guys ever been really upset about something, right? And you'll be really upset, and then you'll go take a hit of cannabis, and then you'll kind of sit there and you'll be like, your mic. Oh,
you get clarity and answers on it, because Mother Cannabis is an actual being. So especially if you go into her being like, because a trigger could come to you, and if you're smoking cannabis, and vaping's not that strong, so like it wouldn't be like super high like the bong days. It's just like a mellowing, like microdosing psilocybin, similar, but they're like different people talking to you. It's like they're similar people, but they're different. But she doesn't even really need to calm you down, because that's naturally already happened. What instead happens is the answers, the information. The unpacking, like she's giving information, and psilocybin gives us tons of quantum information. I feel like cosmic information, and she helps us unpack really deep and dark stuff. But cannabis is really good for just like the everyday stuff. Like I stubbed my toe, and she can make it like answered, and like just all these things. Like, so sorry, continue, because I agree.
No, you're all good. You're all good. No, because I remember even in the early days of my spiritual journey, and even before like I was truly on the spiritual journey, and I would just use cannabis, I'd be upset about something. I would take a hit, and I would be like, after a few minutes, I'd be like, why the fuck was I even mad about that? That was stupid. Like, what, like that was a really dumb thing to get that upset or to get that riled up over, and yes, I know Hiker Trash. Maybe a care package someday. I'm just kidding, but definitely I agree with you. And but even with psilocybin, I currently microdose psilocybin right now, and I'll tell you what, man, I've never how like when we have bad days, like we do as human beings, even being us, on our spiritual evolution, we have bad days, and like I've never been so okay with having a bad day in my life. In my life, like if I am, microdosing psilocybin, because like when I do microdose psilocybin mushrooms, it gives me the insights onto why I'm experiencing this bad day. It's like, well, Steve, this is why you're having this day, because you need to learn a couple of things. You're still not doing that one thing you said you were going to do. I mean, you've been doing it, but not consistently enough. And I get like this dose of honesty out of that plant. And, cannabis does the same thing. But yeah, psilocybin gives me this dose of like honesty. It's like, you know what? Like I am the cause of this bad day. I didn't do these things I was supposed to do, or I didn't take into account like, this and this. So yes, this is kind of my fault. I mean, it ultimately boils down and it makes you realize that you are the source of 99% of pretty much everything that happens to you. Like I said, there's that rare 0.1% case where things happen. Don't get me wrong. But then again, you could even have had an intention towards that, but it makes you realize that you are the reason for 99% of your issues. You are the reason for 99% of your strife, and anything that you experience. So it's like a brutal dose of honesty, but we need that. But yeah, it's funny because like, I could be having like a really bad day or bad morning, and then I will, have my daily psilocybin microdose, and I'll be like, yeah, Steve, you could have done this better. This is why you're having a bad day. And it helps you be honest with yourself, and exactly. So, and that's why these plant medicines, they're sacred. And that's why I tell a lot of people, everybody's surprised when I say this. I'm one of the only people I know who's had a positive Salvia divinorum experience. A lot of people have had very negative experiences with it. And one of the reasons for that was, and the plant spirit told me herself, she was like, one of the reasons why you had a bad experience at that time and everybody else is because I was being portrayed as a party drug. I was being portrayed as a weed alternative. That's not what I am. I am for healing and healing only. I am not for fun. I am not for pleasure. I am for healing. And that is kind of what the spirit of the plant told me. So then I went in, and I approached it from that mindset, and I was like, okay, like I'm going in for healing. I want this to be a healing. I'm not going in expecting to have fun, party, and have a good time. And as soon as I went in with that mentality, holy shit, did the experience change. It was a freaking amazing experience. I felt a lot of love from the spirit because I had recognized its true purpose. I understood what it's there for. So like, I'm with you. These plants are really great guides. The one thing I will say though is always, yes, use them responsibly. Don't abuse them. I mean, psychedelics won't let you abuse them. They will karmatically bar you themselves from abusing them or using them in the wrong context. It's happened to me, I know. So, but no, I agree with you. Cannabis can be a huge helper when it comes to that divine anchor and to integrating a lot of the things we experience.
Perfect. Yeah, 100% agree. This episode could, because I just called it Live with BG Cast, we could retitle it From Jesus to Cannabis. And it's like a complete actually journey of a thread that makes complete sense because it's all connected on that like alchemical healing process of the self, which is what we're really going through now. Because before we make a brand new future, we have to heal what was done in the past. Now, this is going so well, so I don't technically want to end it, but that was the alarm that I have to go get my children soon.
Exactly.
We're going to have to wrap it up. But we've been talking about doing like a co-ministry together. So this was absolute high vibes, and Sam foretold it. So I think this is a good sign that will go very well. And it's a perfect balance of exactly how that kind of information is supposed to come, because the yin and the yang both have their own way of interpreting and saying like the same information, but from like a different lens, from a different angle, and just bringing that Christ middle pillar energy into the one space together. It's just how we experience the divine. And it just makes sense why this went very well. And I hope people got a lot of good information from it, because even I did. Like it just, I don't know, you could just feel like the building of the self. So thank you so much for being here, Stephan. I'll leave you the stage and let people know where they can find you. And thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Anytime. No, I had a great time. Yes, this was an amazing conversation. This needed to be spoken about. One of the biggest things we're starting to see is, a lot of these difficult topics that a lot of people stray from talking about. We need to be talking about that's going to bring the healing to these energies, these topics. And, I am a huge believer that I do think true Christ will, emerge out of modern Christianity, especially with the metaphysics starting to be implemented into the teachings. And that's just something to be excited about. That's something to be happy about. And that's something to celebrate. But guys, you can find me on the Forbidden Knowledge Network. If you guys know Forbidden Knowledge News, Raised by Giants, Legit Bat, Charlie Robinson has Day Zero on there. Give me a check out on there. That's www.forbiddenknowledge.news, and definitely support the documentaries from Chris and Ryder. We have a lot of original content that's made with a lot of heart and a lot of good intention. We don't usually see that nowadays anymore. So yes, definitely go over there and support their docs. And of course, you can find me on all major podcast platforms, anything from Spotify to Rockfin to Spreaker to Apple. You can find me on there, and you can find me on Rumble and YouTube under BG Cast, and you can find me on all social media under BG Cast. I am most active on X and Facebook. Instagram has me in a permanent shadow ban vault. I don't know what's going on over there, but yes, if you want to reach out to me and you want to chat, I am most active on X and Facebook. And thanks for having me back on. It's been a while, and I feel like we covered a lot of ground. We broke down a lot of stuff. We kind of revealed a little bit more about the truth of real Christ. And guys, I'm going to tell you this, and I will say it again. He was a lot like us. And that's something to take note of, that we are also capable of the great things he did in his embodiments, his many embodiments. So just remember, you don't need a medium between you and the divine. You have everything you need within you to make and establish that connection and to solidify it yourself.
Beautiful, perfectly put. And thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to Transcending Ascension. And thank you, Stephan, for being here. Goodbye for now.
Of course.